Hello friends. Did you know that nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy the content, I'd truly appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. It helps a lot. Also, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. Your interaction not only supports the channel's growth, but also helps these stories reach more people. Thank you all for being here. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. I arrived at Quantico on a Tuesday morning in late September. The air was cold, the kind of air that makes you believe in new beginnings. It took 40 minutes by car from the airport, passing through the wooded areas of Virginia. As we approached the academy, the woods seemed to grow denser. When the gates finally came into view, I felt something shift inside me. Here I was, 20 weeks that would either make me or break me. The security guard at the checkpoint barely looked up as he waved our shuttle through. I pressed my face against the window and watched the buildings emerge from among the trees. Red brick, concrete, glass. Everything looked official and permanent, as if it had been placed there forever and would remain long after I was gone. Somewhere in that labyrinth of structures, I would learn to think like a federal agent. Or I would fail. Our group numbered 32. I counted us as we filed off the shuttle, dragging duffel bags and wheeling suitcases across the parking lot. 32 strangers who would become something else over the next 5 months. Some would wash out, some would excel, most would simply survive. I intended to be in that middle group, unremarkable enough to avoid scrutiny, competent enough to pass. The orientation building smelled like floor polish and old coffee. We gathered in a lecture hall with stadium seating, the kind you see in universities. A woman in a dark suit stood at the podium, her expression neutral, her posture military straight. She didn't introduce herself. She simply began. "You are new agent trainees," she said. "For the next 20 weeks you will be addressed as such. You will not use first names among yourselves. You will use surnames only. You are not friends. You are colleagues in training. This distinction matters." I glanced around the room. Most faces showed the same careful blankness I was trying to maintain. A few people looked nervous. One man in the back row was taking notes, his pen moving rapidly across a legal pad. The woman continued speaking, outlining schedules, expectations, consequences for failure. Her voice never changed pitch or tempo. It was like listening to a recording. After the lecture, we were given folders containing our training schedules and assigned to dormitory rooms. I found mine on the second floor of a building that faced the woods. The room was small, institutional, with 2 beds bolted to opposite walls. My roommate hadn't arrived yet. I unpacked methodically, hanging my few civilian clothes in the narrow closet, stacking FBI-issue gear on the desk. The window looked out over a running track, and beyond that, dense trees. It was only mid-afternoon, but the shadows under those trees looked deep. That evening, we had our first formation. We assembled in the courtyard outside the main academic building, standing in rough lines while an instructor walked among us, correcting our posture, our spacing. His name was Briggs. He had the weathered look of someone who had spent decades in federal service, his face lined, but his eyes sharp. "This is where it begins," Briggs said, stopping at the front of our formation. "Tomorrow morning, 0600 hours, you will muster here again. Every morning after that, roll will be called. You will answer when your name is called. You will answer loudly and clearly. If you do not answer, you are marked absent. 3 absences, and you are reviewed for dismissal. This is not college. This is not negotiable." He pulled a clipboard from under his arm and began reading names. The sound echoed off the surrounding buildings, each surname followed by a crisp, "Here, sir," or "Present, sir," from somewhere in our formation. I listened to the rhythm of it, the call and response that would become routine. "Dalton, here, sir." "Fisher, present, sir." "Garrett, here, sir." Then Briggs called a name I hadn't heard during orientation. "Holloway." There was a pause. I looked around, trying to see who would respond. No one did. Briggs didn't look up from his clipboard. He simply made a mark and continued. "Jensen, here, sir." The roll call finished without incident. We were dismissed to the dining facility for dinner, a utilitarian space filled with long tables and plastic chairs. I sat with 2 other trainees, both of whom had come from local law enforcement. We didn't talk much. The food was adequate, institutional. I barely tasted it. Back in my room that night, I finally met my roommate. His name was Nolan. He was tall, maybe 6'2", with a military bearing that suggested prior service. We exchanged minimal pleasantries. He told me he'd been a Marine MP. I told him I'd worked financial crimes in Chicago. We agreed on a schedule for the bathroom and turned off the lights by 10. I lay awake longer than I should have, staring at the ceiling. Outside, the Virginia night was full of sounds I wasn't used to. Insects, wind through trees, the distant thump of a helicopter. And beneath it all, silence, the kind that makes you aware of your own breathing. The next morning, I was awake before the alarm. Nolan and I dressed in silence, pulling on the Academy's physical training uniform. Gray shorts, gray t-shirt, running shoes. We joined the stream of trainees heading toward the courtyard. The sky was still dark, the air cold enough to see our breath. Briggs was already there, clipboard in hand. We formed up. The routine began again. "Dalton, here, sir." "Fisher, present, sir." "Garrett, here, sir." "Holloway." Silence again. I found myself straining to hear a response that didn't come. Briggs made his mark. Continued reading. When my name was called, I answered automatically, my voice joining the chorus of 31 others. 31, not 32. I was sure we'd started with 32. After roll call, we ran. 5 miles through the woods on trails that wound between the buildings and deeper into the forest. My lungs burned in the cold air. By mile 3, the group had stretched out, faster runners pulling ahead, slower ones falling behind. I stayed in the middle, maintaining a steady pace. When we finally circled back to the starting point, Briggs was there with the timer, calling out our names as we crossed an invisible finish line. The rest of the day was classroom work, lectures on federal law, investigative procedures, ethics. The instructors rotated, each bringing their own style, but the content blurred together. I took notes mechanically, my hand moving across the page while my mind wandered. I kept thinking about that name, Holloway. Why call it if no one was going to answer? Maybe it was a test. Maybe they were seeing if anyone would question it. No one did. That evening, after dinner, I approached Nolan in our room. "Did you notice anything strange during roll call?" I asked. He was sitting on his bed, polishing his dress shoes. He didn't look up. "Like what?" "One of the names, Holloway." No one answered. Nolan shrugged. "Maybe they dropped out. Happens all the time in the first week." "But why keep calling the name?" "Bureaucracy," he said. "Probably takes a few days for the paperwork to catch up." It made sense. I let it go. The pattern continued. Every morning, Briggs called roll. Every morning, the name Holloway appeared on his list. Every morning, silence followed. After a week, I stopped noticing. It became part of the rhythm, as routine as answering my own name. Training intensified. We moved from classroom to practical exercises. Firearms training at the range. Hours spent in the simulator learning to shoot under stress. defensive tactics in the gym, grappling with each other on padded mats. Surveillance exercises in the woods, trying to track and photograph each other without being detected. The days ran together, each one exhausting in identical ways. One afternoon, about 3 weeks in, we had our first interrogation training. We were led to a building I hadn't been in before, set back from the main complex near the tree line. Inside, a long corridor stretched away from the entrance, lined with doors. Each door had a small window of one-way glass, rooms for observation. The instructor's name was Webb. He was shorter than Briggs, with a soft voice that made you lean in to hear him. "Interrogation is an art," he said, walking slowly along the corridor. "It requires patience, control, the ability to read another person and adapt your approach accordingly. Over the next several weeks, you will practice this art. You will take turns as interrogator and subject. You will learn what it feels like to be on both sides of the table." He stopped in front of one of the doors. Through the glass, I could see a small room containing nothing but a metal table and 2 chairs. "These rooms are equipped with recording equipment," Webb continued. "Everything that happens inside will be documented. You will review your own performance. You will learn from your mistakes." We were divided into pairs. My partner was a woman named Reeves. She had a background in military intelligence and a way of looking at you that suggested she was cataloging everything. We drew lots to determine who would go first. I drew interrogator. The room was smaller than it looked through the glass. Colder, too. I sat in one chair while Reeves sat across from me. Webb stood just outside, visible through the window, observing. He had given us a scenario. Reeves was a suspect in a fraud investigation. My job was to get her to confess. For 20 minutes, we went through the motions. I asked questions. She deflected. I tried different approaches, alternating between friendly and aggressive. Nothing worked. By the time Webb knocked on the glass to signal the end of the exercise, I was frustrated, and Reeves looked bored. "Adequate," Webb said when I emerged. "But you're too eager. You're trying to force the confession instead of guiding the subject toward it. Watch the others. Learn." I spent the next hour observing through the glass as other pairs went through the same exercise. Some were better than I'd been. Some were worse. But all of it felt artificial, performative. These were our colleagues, not real suspects. Everyone knew it was just training. Then something caught my attention. In one of the rooms near the end of the corridor, I saw a trainee I didn't recognize. He was sitting alone at the table, no partner visible. The posture was wrong too, slumped forward with his head in his hands. I moved closer to the window, trying to get a better look. "Shouldn't someone be in there with him?" I asked Webb, who was making notes on a clipboard. He glanced up, looked at the room I was pointing to, then back at his notes. "Room's empty," he said. I looked again. The figure was still there, motionless. "But there's someone." "That room's not in use today," Webb said, his tone flat. "Pay attention to your own training." I wanted to argue, but something in his expression stopped me. I turned back to the window. The room was empty. Just a table and 2 chairs. I must have been looking at a reflection or a shadow. The light in the corridor was playing tricks. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about that room, about the figure I'd seen, or thought I'd seen. Nolan was already asleep, his breathing deep and even. I got up, pulled on sweatpants and a t-shirt, and walked to the bathroom at the end of the hall. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in a sickly yellow glow. When I came back, I passed a bulletin board near the stairwell. It was covered with notices, training schedules, announcements. In the corner, almost hidden beneath other papers, I saw a class roster. Our class roster. I pulled it free and scanned the names. There were 32 names on the list. I counted them twice to be sure. 32, just like I'd thought on the first day. But when I ran my finger down the alphabetical listing, I stopped at a name that made my stomach tighten. Holloway, J. The name was there, printed in the same font as all the others. Official, part of the record. I looked at the names above and below it. Everything seemed normal, but J. Holloway didn't exist. I'd never seen anyone answer to that name. Never seen anyone who matched it in our formation, our classes, our dining hall. I folded the roster and took it back to my room. Nolan stirred when I came in but didn't wake. I sat on my bed with the paper in my hands, staring at that name until the letters stopped making sense. The next morning, during physical training, I fell into step beside Reeves. We ran in silence for the first mile. Then I asked her, "Do you know anyone named Holloway?" She glanced at me, her breathing steady despite the pace. "Why?" "Just curious. The name keeps coming up." "Coming up where?" "Roll call, the roster." She was quiet for a moment, focused on her stride. Then she said, "No, I don't know anyone by that name." "You're sure?" "I'm sure. Why does it matter?" I didn't have a good answer. "It doesn't," I said. "Forget it." But I couldn't forget it. Over the following days, I started paying closer attention during formations. I tried to match faces to the names Briggs called. Dalton was a stocky guy with a buzz cut. Fisher was the woman who always stood in the front row. Garrett was the former Marine who ran faster than anyone else. I could place most of them, but Holloway remained absent. A name without a person. I considered asking Briggs directly, but couldn't figure out how to phrase the question without sounding paranoid. "Hey, why do you keep calling a name that no one answers?" It seemed absurd. There had to be a reasonable explanation. Administrative error. Someone who dropped out but remained on the official roster. It happened. A month into training, we had our first major exam. Written test covering everything we'd learned so far. Law, procedure, ethics, investigative techniques. We sat in a large room, each at our own desk, with proctors walking the aisles to ensure no one cheated. The test took 3 hours. Afterward, we were told results would be posted within 48 hours. Those 2 days dragged. Training continued, but everyone was distracted, wondering how they'd performed. When the results finally appeared on the bulletin board, a crowd gathered immediately. I pushed through to the front, scanning the list for my name. I'd passed, not spectacularly, but solidly in the middle of the pack. Relief washed over me. I was still here, still in the game. Then I noticed something strange. The results were listed alphabetically, each name followed by a score. I counted them, 32 names, 32 scores. And there, between Harper and Jensen, was Holloway, J, score 87. Holloway had taken the test. Holloway had passed. I felt a hand on my shoulder and turned to find Nolan grinning. "Did you see your score?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, distracted. "Yeah, I passed." "We should celebrate. Some of us are going off base tonight. You in?" I shook my head. "I'm tired. Gonna stay in." He shrugged and moved off to join a group of trainees heading toward this parking lot. I stayed in front of the bulletin board, staring at that name and that score. 87. Better than mine. Better than a lot of people. But who had taken the test? Who had filled out that exam booklet and turned it in to be graded? I went to the administrative office. It was located in the main building, a warren of cubicles and filing cabinets staffed by civilian employees who handled the academy's paperwork. A woman at the front desk looked up as I approached. "Can I help you?" "I have a question about the exam results," I said. There's a name on the list, Holloway, and I don't think I've ever met this person. Is there any way to verify who actually took the test?" She frowned. "What's your class number?" I told her. She typed something into her computer, waited, typed more. Her frown deepened. "Holloway J," she said. "Enrolled in your class. Test score recorded. Everything looks normal. But I've never seen this person. Are there any other records? A photo? Contact information?" "I can't give out personal information about other trainees," she said, her tone shifting from helpful to bureaucratic. "If you have a specific concern, you should speak with your training coordinator." "Who would that be?" "Instructor Briggs." I thanked her and left. Of course, it was Briggs, the man who called roll every morning, who said that name into the empty air and moved on without comment. I could ask him, but what would I say? What was my actual concern? That someone was enrolled in our class but didn't physically exist. It sounded crazy, even in my own head. That night, I lay in bed again, listening to Nolan's breathing, thinking about patterns. In training, they taught us to look for patterns, anomalies, things that didn't fit. Holloway was an anomaly, a name without a face, a test score without a test taker, a presence that existed only on paper. But did it matter? We were weeks into training. No one had been hurt. No one had failed because of this. It was strange, yes. Unexplained, yes. But maybe some things didn't need explanations. Maybe I was looking for problems where none existed. I closed my eyes and tried to sleep. Outside, the Virginia night continued its chorus of sounds. Inside, the room was warm and dark and safe, and somewhere in the administrative files of the FBI Academy, the name J. Holloway remained, as official and permanent as any of ours. November arrived with cold rain that turned the academy grounds into a maze of mud and sodden leaves. Training shifted focus. Less classroom time, more practical application. We spent long hours in the woods conducting surveillance exercises, shivering in wet clothes while trying to photograph each other without being detected. We practiced vehicle stops on a closed course, approaching cars with drawn training weapons, shouting commands that echoed off the surrounding buildings. The physical demands increased too. Morning runs grew longer, sometimes stretching to 8 or 10 miles through the forest. The defensive tactics training became more intense, with instructors encouraging us to go harder, faster, to test our limits. Injuries became common. Sprained ankles, pulled muscles, bruised ribs. The academy clinic saw a steady stream of trainees limping through its doors. I noticed the name less frequently now. Holloway had become part of the background noise, called every morning during roll and answered with silence. None of the other trainees seemed bothered by it. When I occasionally thought to look for patterns, to see if anything else was out of place, I found nothing. Just the name. Just that persistent, inexplicable absence. We were 8 weeks into the program when the night exercises began. Briggs announced it during formation one morning. "Starting next week, you will participate in evening tactical scenarios," he said. "These exercises will take place after dark and may run until 0200 hours or later. They are mandatory. They will test your ability to operate under stress and fatigue. Some of you will find them difficult. If you cannot handle darkness, if you cannot handle uncertainty, speak to your coordinator now." No one spoke. Of course, no one spoke. To admit weakness at this stage would be professional suicide. The first night exercise was scheduled for the following Tuesday. We assembled at 2000 hours in full tactical gear, body armor, helmet, duty weapon loaded with training ammunition. The instructors divided us into groups of 4. My group consisted of Nolan, Reeves, and a quiet guy named Porter, who rarely spoke unless directly addressed. The scenario was straightforward. We were to approach a building at the far edge of the academy grounds, clear it room by room, and secure any simulated suspects inside. Instructors playing the role of suspects would be armed with training weapons that fired marking rounds. If you got hit, you were out. The exercise ended when all suspects were secured or all trainees were eliminated. They loaded us into a van and drove us to a drop point about a mile from the target building. When the doors opened, we stepped out into complete darkness. The instructors had chosen a night with no moon. Cloud cover blocked even the stars. Our only light came from the tactical flashlights mounted on our weapons. "You have 2 hours," the driver said. "Good luck." The van pulled away, leaving us alone in the woods. We moved in formation, Nolan on point, Porter taking rear security, Reeves and I in the middle. The forest was alive with sounds, every snapping twig and rustling leaf amplified by darkness and adrenaline. Our flashlights carved narrow tunnels through the black, illuminating tree trunks and undergrowth, but revealing little of what lay beyond. After 20 minutes of careful movement, we reached the building. It was an old training structure, 2 stories of brick and concrete with most of its windows boarded up. A single door faced us, standing slightly ajar. Orange light flickered inside, too irregular to be electric. Candles or lanterns. Nolan signaled for us to stack up on the door. We moved into position, weapons raised, hearts hammering. On his count, we flowed inside. The entry room was empty, except for a metal desk and a chair. The flickering light came from a kerosene lantern sitting on the desk. Beyond it, a hallway stretched into darkness. Doors on either side all closed. We cleared the first room. Empty. Second room, empty. Third room, empty. The building seemed abandoned, but we knew instructors were here somewhere waiting to ambush us. At the end of the hallway, a staircase led up to the second floor. Nolan pointed, and we began to climb. The stairs creaked under our weight, announcing our presence. Tactically useless, but we had no choice. The second floor was laid out identically to the first. Long hallway, closed doors, silence. We started clearing rooms again. First room, empty. Second room, empty. Third room, a figure in the corner, weapon raised. We all fired. The marking rounds hit center mass. The instructor playing the suspect called out, "I'm hit," and dropped his weapon. 1 down, we continued. Fourth room, empty. Fifth room, 2 suspects. We engaged, but one of them got Porter. A blue marking round splattered across his chest armor. He swore and lowered his weapon out of the game. Down to 3, we finished clearing the second floor. 2 more suspects found and neutralized. But the scenario wasn't over. Somewhere in this building, at least one more instructor was hiding. We went back downstairs, more cautious now. Reeves took point while Nolan covered our rear. I stayed in the middle, trying to watch everywhere at once. My flashlight beam swept across walls, floors, doorways. Everything looked wrong in the harsh white light. Shadows too deep, angles too sharp. Then I heard it. Footsteps, coming from above us, but we'd just cleared the second floor. Every room, every closet, there was nowhere left to hide. "Second floor secure," Nolan whispered. "We cleared it." "I hear it too," Reeves said. We stood in the hallway listening. The footsteps continued. Slow, deliberate, moving from one end of the building to the other. Back and forth, back and forth. "Maybe one of the instructors doubled back," I suggested. "Not possible," Nolan said. "We'd have seen them on the stairs." But there was no other explanation. We returned to the staircase and climbed again, weapons raised, every sense alert. The second floor hallway looked exactly as we'd left it. Doors open from our initial sweep, empty rooms visible beyond. The footsteps had stopped. "Check the rooms again," Reeves said. We moved through them systematically. Nothing. No one. Just empty spaces and our own breathing. "This doesn't make sense," Nolan said. Before anyone could respond, we heard a voice. Faint. Distant. Coming from somewhere below us. It sounded like someone calling a name, but I couldn't make out the words. We went downstairs. The entry room was empty, the lantern still burning on the desk. The voice had stopped. We stood there, 3 trainees in full tactical gear, suddenly unsure of what we were supposed to be doing. "Maybe it's a recording," I said, "part of the scenario." "Why would they do that?" Reeves asked. I didn't have an answer. We spent another 30 minutes searching the building. Every room, every closet, every possible hiding place. We found nothing. No more suspects, no more instructors, no explanation for the footsteps or the voice. Eventually, we admitted defeat and exited the building. The van was waiting in the same spot where it had dropped us off. The driver looked at his watch. 2 hours and 15 minutes, he said. "Over time, you fail." We climbed in without argument, too tired to care. On the ride back, Porter asked, "Did you guys hear anything weird in there?" "Footsteps," Nolan said. "Yeah," and a voice. "Recording," Reeves said, but she didn't sound convinced. We didn't discuss it further. When we got back to the dormitory, I showered and fell into bed, asleep before my head hit the pillow. The next morning, during roll call, I noticed something different. When Briggs called Holloway's name, there was a pause, just like always. But this time, I could have sworn I heard something. Not a voice exactly, more like an exhalation, a breath in the silence. I looked around. No one else reacted. The roll call continued normally. Maybe I'd imagined it. I was tired, operating on too little sleep. The mind plays tricks under those conditions. We'd learned that in class. Sleep deprivation causes hallucinations, auditory and visual. Perfectly normal, nothing to worry about, but it bothered me anyway. The night exercises continued weekly. Each one different, each one designed to push us further. We practiced hostage rescue in abandoned buildings. We conducted mock arrests in complete darkness. We tracked suspects through the woods using night vision equipment that turned the world into shades of green. During one exercise, about 3 weeks after the first, my group was clearing another building. This one was larger, more complex, with multiple floors and a basement. We'd been inside for over an hour, working our way methodically through the structure, when we came to a door that shouldn't have been there. It was located at the end of a hallway on the 3rd floor. According to the building schematic we'd been shown during briefing, this hallway had 4 doors, 2 on each side, but standing here now, I counted 5. The extra door was at the very end, painted the same institutional gray as the walls, easy to miss if you weren't paying attention. "That wasn't on the diagram," Reeves said. "Storage closet," Nolan suggested. "We should clear it." We stacked up. Nolan tried the handle. Unlocked. He pulled the door open and we flowed inside, weapons raised. The room was small, maybe 8 feet square. Empty, except for a metal folding chair in the center. On the chair sat a clipboard with a single sheet of paper. I approached cautiously, half expecting some kind of booby trap, but nothing happened. I picked up the clipboard. It was a roster, a class roster, our class roster. Names listed alphabetically just like the one I'd seen on the bulletin board weeks ago. I scanned down the list. There was my name, there was Nolan's, Reeves's, Porter's, all 32 of us, including Holloway J. "What is it?" Reeves asked. I showed her. She frowned. "Why would this be here?" "I don't know." Nolan checked his watch. "We're wasting time. Leave it and keep moving." I set the clipboard back on the chair. We exited the room and continued the exercise, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. That roster, sitting in that room, the room that wasn't supposed to exist. After the exercise, I went back to the administrative office. The same woman was at the front desk. She didn't recognize me. "Can I help you?" "I need to see a building schematic," I said, "for the structure we used in tonight's exercise." "Which one?" I gave her the building number. She typed on her computer, waited, then shook her head. "Those aren't publicly available. Only instructors have access. It's important. I can't help you." I thanked her and left. Of course they weren't available. Why would they be? But I needed to know if that room was supposed to be there. If it wasn't, then someone had created it. And if they had, why put a roster inside? Why leave it there for us to find? Unless it wasn't for us, unless it was for something else. That thought disturbed me more than I wanted to admit. The following week brought our midterm evaluations. Each trainee met individually with Briggs to discuss progress, strengths, areas needing improvement. My appointment was scheduled for 1400 hours on a Thursday. I arrived 5 minutes early and waited outside his office. The door was closed. I could hear voices inside, muffled but distinct. Briggs and someone else. The conversation went on for several minutes, then stopped. The door opened and Briggs appeared. "Come in," he said. I then entered. The office was small, lined with filing cabinets and bookshelves. A desk dominated the center, covered with papers and folders. Briggs sat behind it and gestured for me to take the chair opposite. "Your performance has been acceptable," he said, opening a folder with my name on it. "Physical fitness scores are average. Academic scores are average. Firearms qualification, adequate. Defensive tactics, needs improvement. Overall, you're tracking toward successful completion. Thank you, sir." He closed the folder and looked at me. "Do you have any concerns? Anything you want to discuss?" This was my chance. I could ask about Holloway, about the roster, about the footsteps and the voices in the room that shouldn't exist. But looking at Briggs' face, at his calm, professional expression, I couldn't do it. What would I say? What evidence did I have? A name on a roster, a door at the end of a hallway, sounds in an empty building. "No concerns, sir," I said. "Good. Keep up the work. Dismissed." I stood and left. In the hallway outside, I paused, looking back at the closed door. I could hear Briggs inside, talking again. The same muffled conversation. But I'd been the last appointment of the day. There was no one else scheduled. I walked away quickly, before I could convince myself to go back and listen. That night, I dreamed about the building. I was back in that third-floor hallway, standing in front of the door that shouldn't exist. It was open this time. Inside, the metal chair sat empty, the clipboard gone. But the room wasn't empty. Someone was standing in the corner, hidden in shadow. I couldn't see their face, but I knew they were watching me. I woke up sweating, heart racing. Nolan's bed was empty. I checked my watch, 0300 hours. He must have been on night watch. We all took turns, walking the grounds, making sure nothing was out of place. I couldn't go back to sleep. I got up and dressed, pulling on sweats and a jacket. The dormitory was quiet, everyone else asleep. I walked to the bathroom, splashed water on my face, stared at my reflection in the mirror. I looked tired, more than tired, worn down. On my way back, I passed the common room. The TV was on, volume low, casting flickering blue light across the empty couches. I stopped, confused. No one was supposed to be here. We had curfew. But the TV was definitely on, showing what looked like security camera footage. multiple angles of different locations around the academy. The main gate, the parking lot, the exercise buildings. I stepped closer. One of the camera feeds showed a figure walking across the courtyard. I recognized the distinctive gate and the buildings in the background. It was happening now. Live footage. The figure was wearing a training uniform, moving with purpose from one building to another. Then the figure stopped, turned, and looked directly at the camera. I couldn't see the face clearly, the image too grainy, the distance too far, but something about the posture, the way they stood there motionless, made my skin crawl. They stayed like that for maybe 10 seconds, then turned and walked out of frame. I grabbed the remote and tried to rewind the footage, but the TV went dark. Just shut off, as if someone had pulled the plug. I checked the connections. Everything was fine. I pressed power. Nothing happened. Can't sleep? I spun around. Nolan was standing in the doorway, still in his watch gear. The TV was on, I said. I was just, yeah, it does that sometimes. Comes on by itself. Probably a short in the wiring. You've seen it before? Couple times. Don't worry about it. He crossed to the coffee maker and started brewing a pot. I stood there, looking at the dark screen, trying to convince myself that he was right. Just faulty wiring. Just a glitch. But I'd seen that figure. I'd seen them looking at the camera, looking at me. December brought snow and shorter days. The academy took on a different character in winter. The red brick buildings stark against white ground. The Virginia woods silent and bare. We were 13 weeks into training now, past the halfway mark, deep into the specialized instruction that would define our careers. I stopped sleeping well. Not all at once, but gradually, night by night. I'd lie awake listening to Nolan's breathing, my mind replaying moments from training, the footsteps in empty buildings, the voice I couldn't quite hear, the figure on the security feed. Each incident explainable on its own, but together they formed a pattern I couldn't ignore. The name continued. Every morning, every roll call. Holloway. Silence. A mark on Briggs's clipboard. Move on. I started keeping notes. Nothing official, just a small notebook I carried in my pocket. I'd write down anything unusual. The date, the time, what I'd observed. Most days there was nothing to record. Some days there were small things. A door left open that should have been locked. Equipment moved from where we'd left it. Footsteps in corridors that should have been empty. One morning in mid-December, during physical training, we ran a different route. Instead of the usual loop through the woods, Briggs led us deeper into the academy grounds, past buildings I'd never noticed before. Old structures, some of them clearly abandoned. Windows dark and doors sealed with warning tape. We ran past a particularly decrepit building, 3 stories of crumbling brick, and I noticed something. On the 3rd floor, in one of the windows, I saw a light, just for a moment. A pale glow that could have been a reflection or a flashlight or nothing at all, but it was there. I was breathing too hard to mention it. By the time I'd caught my breath, we were a quarter mile away, and it seemed pointless to bring up. Another small thing, another entry in my notebook. That afternoon, we had an unusual session scheduled. Psychological evaluation, mandatory for all trainees at the midway point. We reported to a building near the administrative complex, a newer structure with the antiseptic feel of a medical facility. I was called into a small office where a woman in civilian clothes waited behind a desk. She introduced herself as Dr. Mason, contract psychologist for the academy. We shook hands. Her grip was firm, professional. "This is a routine evaluation," she said. "Nothing to be concerned about. I'm going to ask you some questions about your experience here, your stress levels, any concerns you might have. It's completely confidential. Nothing you say will go in your official record unless you express intent to harm yourself or others." Understood? Understood. She asked standard questions first. How was I adjusting to the training? Any physical issues? Relationship with my roommate okay? Family life stable? I gave standard answers. Everything was fine, no complaints. Then she asked, have you experienced anything you would describe as unusual since arriving at Quantico? I hesitated. Unusual how? Anything that struck you as out of place? Experiences you couldn't easily explain? Like what? I'm asking you. She smiled, but her eyes were watchful. Have you? I thought about my notebook, the entries I'd made, the pattern I'd been tracking. This was my chance to tell someone official, someone who might actually have answers. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the way she phrased the question. Have you experienced anything unusual? Not have you noticed anything unusual. Experienced, as if the problem might be with me rather than with what I'd observed. No, I said. Nothing unusual. You're sure? I'm sure. She made a note on her pad. Sleep patterns normal? Normal enough. Appetite? Fine. Any recurring thoughts or concerns? Just the usual stress, wondering if I'll pass. Another note. That's natural. Most trainees feel that way. She looked up. Have you heard any other trainees mention unusual experiences? No. If you do, I'd like you to report it to me directly. Can you do that? Yes. She smiled again. Good. That's all I need. You're cleared to continue training. I left feeling unsettled. The evaluation itself wasn't unusual, but her questions were. Why would she ask about other trainees' experiences? What was she looking for? That evening, I mentioned it to Nolan. We were in our room, both reading through case files for an upcoming exam. He looked up from his textbook. She asked me the same things, he said. Really? Yeah. Wanted to know if I'd experienced anything unusual, if other people had mentioned anything. What did you tell her? The truth. Nothing unusual has happened. I nodded. Right, same. He went back to reading. I tried to do the same, but the words wouldn't stick. Nothing unusual has happened. That's what we'd both said. But it wasn't true, at least not for me. Things had been unusual. Small things, yes. Explainable things, maybe. But unusual nonetheless. Unless I was the only one experiencing them. Unless the problem really was with me. The next night, exercise was different from the previous ones. We assembled at 1900 hours, but instead of being divided into groups, we were told to work individually. Each trainee would enter a building alone, navigate to a specific room, retrieve an envelope, and exit. Simple. No suspects to engage, no tactical challenges, just navigation and task completion. They gave us each a different building, a different target room. Mine was designated as Building 7, Room 214. I'd never been in Building 7 before. When the van dropped me off, I found myself standing in front of another old structure. This one isolated from the main complex, surrounded by trees. The front door was unlocked. I entered cautiously, flashlight in hand. The interior smelled of mildew and old wood. The layout was straightforward. A central staircase, hallways branching left and right on each floor. I climbed to the second floor and found room 214 easily. The door was open. Inside, a metal desk. On the desk, an envelope. My name was written on it in block letters. I picked it up, turned to leave. Then I heard it. From somewhere above me. Footsteps. I froze. This was supposed to be a solo exercise. No other trainees in this building. No instructors. Just me. But someone was walking on the third floor. I should have left. completed the exercise, exited the building, reported back. But I couldn't. I had to know. I climbed to the 3rd floor. The hallway was dark, my flashlight the only source of light. The footsteps had stopped. Everything was silent. I moved slowly, checking each room as I passed. Empty, empty, empty. At the end of the hallway, one final door. I approached it, tried the handle, locked. From inside the room I heard breathing. Slow, steady, like someone at rest. I knocked. No response. The breathing continued. "Hello?" I called. "This is trainee reporting. Identify yourself." Nothing, just that breathing. I stood there for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. Finally, I turned and left. Went back downstairs, exited the building, walked to the pickup point. The van was already there, engine running. The driver checked his clipboard as I climbed in. "You got the envelope?" I held it up. "Good, you're the last one." On the ride back, I opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a single line of text. "Exercise complete. Report to your dormitory." That's all. Nothing else. Back in my room, I added another entry to my notebook. Building 7, room 214. Footsteps. Breathing behind a locked door. I read through the previous entries looking for patterns, for any kind of sense. Nothing emerged. Just a list of small anomalies, each one dismissible, but together suggesting something I couldn't quite define. The next morning during roll call, something changed. When Briggs called Holloway's name, I heard it again. That exhalation, that breath. But this time it was louder, clearer, almost like a word. "Here." It was so faint, I could barely distinguish it from the wind. But I heard it. I was sure I heard it. I looked around frantically. No one else reacted. Briggs made his mark and continued reading names as if nothing had happened. Dalton answered. Fisher answered. Garrett answered. The routine continued. After formation, I approached Reeves. "Did you hear that?" I asked. "Hear what?" "During roll call, when Briggs called Holloway." She frowned. "I didn't hear anything." Someone answered. No one answered. No one ever answers. But I heard, "You're tired," she said. "We're all tired. Get some sleep." She walked away. I stood there in the courtyard, watching the other trainees disperse to their first classes of the day, and wondered if she was right. Maybe I was hearing things. Maybe the stress and sleep deprivation were finally catching up to me. That afternoon, I had another session with Dr. Mason. This one wasn't scheduled. She called me in during what should have been free time. "I wanted to follow up on our previous conversation," she said as I sat down. "How have you been feeling?" "Fine." "Sleeping well?" "Well enough." She made a note. "Have you experienced anything unusual since we last spoke?" There it was again. That specific phrasing. "Why do you keep asking me that?" It's a standard question. "No, it's not. You didn't ask about stress or performance or any of the normal evaluation criteria. You keep asking specifically about unusual experiences." She set down her pen. "You're observant. That's good. It'll serve you well in the field." She paused. "I'm asking because we want to ensure trainees are psychologically equipped to handle the unique pressures of academy life. Sometimes people experience things they can't easily categorize. Stress manifests in unusual ways. So you think I'm imagining things? I didn't say that, but that's what you mean. Sleep deprivation causes hallucinations. We learned that in class. It can, yes, but I'm not suggesting you're hallucinating. I'm simply asking if you've noticed anything you found difficult to explain." I met her eyes. "Would you believe me if I said yes?" "I would listen." "And then what? Put it in a report? Flag me as psychologically unstable? Send me home?" "That's not how this works." "Then how does it work?" She sighed. "I'm trying to help you. If you're experiencing difficulties, I need to know. Not to punish you, but to provide support." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to tell her about the name, about the rooms, about the footsteps, and the breathing and the voice on the security feed. But I couldn't. Because even as I sat there, I wasn't sure any of it was real. Maybe it was all in my head. Maybe Reeves was right and I just needed sleep. "I'm fine," I said. "Thank you for your concern, but I'm fine." She studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, but if that changes, my door is open." I left her office and went straight to the library, a quiet building on the edge of campus where trainees could study without interruption. I found a corner desk and pulled out my notebook, reading through the entries again. Each one, isolated, could be explained. Fatigue, stress, misperception. But together, I heard a sound and looked up. Someone was standing at the end of the aisle, partially hidden by the shelves. I couldn't see their face, but they seemed to be watching me. "Can I help you?" I called. No response. The figure didn't move. I stood, walked toward them. As I got closer, they stepped back, deeper into the shadows between the shelves. I followed, rounded the corner. The aisle was empty. I stood there, breathing hard, my heart pounding. No one, nothing, just books and empty space. I left the library, went back to my room. Nolan was there, cleaning his service weapon. "You okay?" he asked. "You look pale." "I'm fine, just tired." "You should get checked out at the clinic. They can give you something to help you sleep." "Maybe." I sat on my bed and stared at the wall. The room felt smaller than usual, the ceiling lower, the air thicker. Outside, the December light was already fading, the afternoon slipping into evening. That night, I did something I'd been avoiding. I went back to Building 7. It was easy to slip away. Nolan was on watch duty. Everyone else was either studying or sleeping. I pulled on dark clothes, grabbed a flashlight, and left the dormitory through a side exit that wasn't monitored. The walk to Building 7 took 20 minutes. The moon was out, nearly full, casting the academy grounds in pale silver. The building loomed ahead, dark and silent. I tried the front door. Still unlocked. Inside, I climbed directly to the 3rd floor. The hallway was exactly as I remembered. I walked to the end, to that locked door. Put my ear against it. Silence. No breathing, no movement. I tried the handle. It turned. The door was unlocked. I pushed it open and stepped inside. The room was small, maybe 10 feet square. Empty, except for a metal folding chair in the center. On the chair was a clipboard. I approached it slowly, my flashlight beam trembling slightly. It was a roster, our class roster. Names listed alphabetically. I scanned down the list and found it. Holloway, J. But something was different this time. Next to the name, someone had written a date and time in pencil. Tomorrow's date, 0600 hours. The time of morning formation. I grabbed the clipboard and ran. Down the stairs, through the building, out into the night. I didn't stop until I was back in my room. Door locked, breathing hard. Nolan was still on watch. I was alone. I set the clipboard on my desk and stared at it. Tomorrow morning. 0600 hours. Something was going to happen. I didn't know what, but I knew it was connected to that name, to all the small anomalies I'd been tracking for weeks. I didn't sleep that night, just sat in the chair by my desk watching the clock, waiting for morning. When 0530 arrived, I got dressed and went to formation early. The courtyard was empty, the sky still dark. I stood in my usual spot and waited. Other trainees began to arrive. Slowly at first, then in a steady stream. Nolan appeared, looking tired from his watch shift. Reeves showed up, along with Porter and Fisher and all the others. We formed our lines. Briggs appeared at exactly 0600 hours. He took his position at the front of our formation, clipboard in hand. "Attention," he called. We snapped to. The roll call began. Dalton, here, sir. Fisher, present, sir. Garrett, here, sir. Then Holloway. And this time someone answered, "Here, sir." The voice came from the middle of our formation. Male, unfamiliar, clear as day. I turned to look, trying to see who had spoken, but there were too many people, too many faces. I couldn't identify the source. Briggs made his mark and continued. The rest of roll call proceeded normally. When he finished, he dismissed us to breakfast. I grabbed Nolan's arm as he turned to leave. "Did you hear that?" "Hear what?" "Holloway. Someone answered." He frowned. No one answered. "Yes, they did. Someone said, 'Here, sir.' You must have heard it." "I didn't hear anything," Nolan said. "Are you feeling okay?" I let go of his arm, looked around. Everyone was walking away, heading to the dining facility, chatting among themselves. Normal morning routine, as if nothing had happened. But someone had answered. I'd heard it, I was certain. I spent that day in a fog, barely present during classes, my mind replaying that moment over and over. Someone had answered. Holloway had answered. After 15 weeks of silence, the name finally had a voice, but no one else had heard it. Just me. That evening, I went back to see Dr. Mason. She was surprised when I appeared at her door without an appointment, but she let me in. "I need to tell you something," I said. She gestured for me to sit. "I'm listening." And I told her everything. The name on the roster, the footsteps, the breathing, the figure on the security feed, the room with the clipboard, the voice during roll call, all of it. I spoke for maybe 20 minutes while she took notes, her expression neutral, professional. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Thank you for sharing this with me. I know it wasn't easy." "So what does it mean? Am I losing my mind?" "No, you're experiencing stress-related perceptual distortions. It's not uncommon in high-pressure environments. The mind tries to find patterns, to make sense of ambiguous stimuli. Sometimes it creates connections that aren't really there. But the roster, the clipboard, those were real." "Were they? Did anyone else see them?" "I don't know. I didn't ask." "That's part of the pattern," she said gently. "You're experiencing these things in isolation. No witnesses, no verification. That suggests the source is internal rather than external. So it's all in my head. Your brain is doing what it's evolved to do. It's trying to protect you by identifying potential threats. But under stress, that system can become overactive. You start seeing threats that don't exist." I slumped in my chair. "What do I do?" "First, you need to sleep. Real sleep. I'm going to prescribe something mild to help with that. Second, I want you to stop isolating. Spend more time with your fellow trainees. Social connection helps ground us in reality. Third, if you experience anything else unusual, I want you to immediately verify it with someone else. Don't trust your own perception. Get a second opinion." She wrote out a prescription and handed it to me. "These will help you sleep without making you groggy. Take one before bed. And remember, what you're experiencing is a symptom of stress, not a sign of mental illness. You're not crazy. You're just exhausted." I took the prescription. "Thank you." "You're going to be fine," she said. "You're a good trainee. Don't let this derail you." I went to the clinic and filled the prescription. Took the first pill that night. slept for 10 hours straight, dreamless and deep. When I woke up, I felt better, clearer. Maybe Dr. Mason was right. Maybe it was all just stress. I'd been pushing too hard, sleeping too little, looking for problems where none existed. I threw away my notebook, stopped tracking anomalies, focused on training, and for a while it worked. The days passed without incident. Morning formation, physical training, classes, exercises. Everything normal, everything routine. But every morning during roll call, when Briggs called that name, I held my breath, waiting to hear if anyone would answer. No one ever did, except me, in my head, where I heard that voice, clear and distinct, saying, "Here, sir," every single morning. We graduated on a Friday in late January. 20 weeks completed. 32 names called during the final ceremony. 32 trainees received their credentials and became special agents of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I stood on the stage with the others, shook hands with Academy officials, accepted my badge and identification. My family was there. My parents drove down from Chicago. They took photos. We had dinner. They told me how proud they were. I smiled and thanked them and felt nothing. The medication Dr. Mason prescribed had helped with sleep, but it dulled everything else too. I went through the final weeks of training in a haze, competent enough to pass but disconnected from the experience. The other trainees celebrated. I participated mechanically. Everything felt distant, observed through glass. Nolan and I exchanged contact information before parting ways. He was assigned to the New York field office. I was going to Miami. We promised to stay in touch. We both knew we wouldn't. Reeves hugged me goodbye. "Take care of yourself," she said. "You too." She looked at me for a moment, her expression concerned. "You seem different. Since December, like something changed." "I'm just tired. It's more than that." I didn't know what to say. She squeezed my arm and walked away. I left Quantico on a Saturday morning, drove north instead of south, away from my new assignment, toward nothing in particular. I ended up in a small town in Maryland, checked into a motel, and slept for 14 hours. When I woke up, it was dark outside. I ordered food from a diner down the street, ate without tasting it, then sat on the bed staring at the wall. The television was on, but I wasn't watching it. Just needed the noise. My phone rang. Unknown number, I answered. "This is Special Agent Mason," a voice said. "We met at the academy." It took me a moment to place the name. Dr. Mason, the psychologist. "I wanted to check in," she continued. "See how you're doing." "I'm fine." "Are you? You left Quantico before your post-graduation consultation. That's not typical." "I needed some time." "I understand, but I'm concerned. Have you experienced any unusual episodes since we last spoke?" There it was again. That phrasing. "No?" I said. "You're sure?" "I'm sure." "Good, that's good." She paused. "I want you to know that what you experience during training is not uncommon. Many agents go through similar periods of adjustment. It doesn't reflect on your capability or your fitness for service." "Thank you. If you ever need to talk, you have my number. Don't hesitate to call." "I won't." She hung up. I sat there holding the phone, wondering why she'd really called. To check on me, or to confirm something? I drove to Miami the next day, reported to the field office on Monday morning, met my new supervisor, toured the building, received my case assignments. Everything professional. Everything normal. My first week was orientation. Paperwork, administrative tasks, familiarization with local protocols. I met the other agents in my squad. They were friendly enough. asked where I'd come from, how I liked Miami, if I'd found an apartment yet. I gave appropriate answers, made appropriate small talk, kept to myself otherwise. The second week, I got my first real assignment. Financial crimes case, following up on leads from a larger investigation. I interviewed witnesses, reviewed bank records, wrote reports. The work was straightforward. I was competent. My supervisor seemed satisfied. But at night, alone in my temporary housing, I couldn't stop thinking about Quantico, about the name, about all the things I'd experienced and been told were just stress, just fatigue, just my mind playing tricks. I started checking records, quietly, through official databases I now had access to. I searched for J. Holloway, FBI personnel, academy graduates, current agents, former agents. Nothing. I searched academy rosters going back 10 years, 20 years. Looked for any mention of the name, nothing. I even called Nolan. He was settling into his New York assignment, sounded happy. "Do you remember anything strange from training?" I asked. "Strange how?" "The roll call, that name that was always called but never answered." He was quiet for a moment. "What name?" "Holloway. It was called every single morning." "I don't remember that." "You have to remember. It happened every day for 20 weeks. "I think you're misremembering," he said. "Or maybe it was in a different class, but not ours." "It was ours, I'm certain. Listen, I have to go, but maybe you should talk to someone. The transition from academy to fieldwork can be rough. There's no shame in getting help." He hung up. I sat there with the phone in my hand, the same way I'd sat in that motel room in Maryland. No one remembered. Not Nolan, not Reeves when I called her next. Not any of the other trainees I contacted. They all said the same thing. No name called without answer. No unusual experiences. Just normal training. Either they were lying, or I'd experienced something they hadn't. Neither option was comforting. 3 months into my Miami assignment, I got an email from Academy administration. Routine alumni survey. How was I adjusting? Did the training prepare me adequately? Any suggestions for improvement? At the bottom was a link to view my official training record. I clicked it. The file contained everything. My test scores, evaluation reports, disciplinary actions, none, medical records, firearms qualifications, all of it. I scrolled to the class roster section. 32 names, listed alphabetically. Holloway, J, was there, right where it had always been, between Harper and Jensen. But when I clicked on the name to see the individual record, I got an error message, file not found. I tried again, same error. I called the Academy Records Department, explained that I was trying to access a classmate's information and getting an error. "What's the name?" the clerk asked. "Holloway J," I heard typing, then, "I'm not showing anyone by that name in your class." "But it's on the roster. I'm looking at it right now." "The official roster shows 31 graduates from your class. It shows 32 names. I can send you a screenshot." "Please do." I took a screenshot and emailed it to her, waited while she reviewed it. "That's strange," she said. "This roster shows 32 names, but our system only has records for 31. Give me a moment." She put me on hold. 5 minutes passed. 10. Finally, she came back. "I've consulted with my supervisor. It appears there was an administrative error. Someone was added to your class roster who shouldn't have been there. A clerical mistake. We'll correct it." "Who was it?" "I can't disclose personnel information." "But they were in my class. I should know who they were. According to our records, this person was never actually enrolled. It was just a name that accidentally appeared on some documents. It's being removed now. That doesn't make sense. The name was called every day during roll call. She was quiet for a moment. I'm sorry, but that's impossible. If someone isn't enrolled, their name wouldn't appear on the daily roll call sheet. You must be thinking of a different name. I'm not. It was Holloway. J. Holloway. I'm afraid I can't help you further. If you have other concerns about your training record, please submit them in writing. She hung up. I sat at my desk in the Miami field office, surrounded by case files and evidence boxes, and felt something crack inside me. Not dramatically, just a small fissure, a hairline fracture in the foundation of what I thought I knew. Either everyone was lying, or I was losing my mind. Those were the only options. I stopped asking questions after that. Focused on work. Did my job, closed cases, got good performance reviews, built a reputation as a solid agent, reliable if unremarkable. But I never stopped looking. In every database I accessed, every record system I used for investigations, I'd run a search for that name. J. Holloway, FBI. Never found anything. Years passed. I transferred from Miami to Chicago. From Chicago to Denver. Built a career. Made colleagues, not friends. Lived alone. Slept with the medication Dr. Mason prescribed. Even though I didn't work for the FBI anymore in any official capacity that would justify a prescription. I found other doctors, other pills. Sometimes I'd dream about Quantico, about standing in that courtyard at 0600 hours, waiting for roll call to begin. About hearing my name and answering. About hearing that other name and the silence that followed. Except in the dreams, someone always answered. And when I turned to see who it was, I'd see myself, standing a few rows back, looking forward, saying, "Here, sir," in a voice I recognized but couldn't quite place. I retired at 25 years, took my pension and moved to a small town in Montana. Far from everything, far from everyone. I still check sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep. I log into databases I probably shouldn't still have access to. I search for that name, never find it. But I know it was real. I know what I experienced. The footsteps, the breathing, the voice, the roster, all of it. And sometimes, in the quiet moments before dawn, I hear it again. That voice during roll call, clear and distinct. "Here, sir," not coming from anywhere external, not a hallucination or a memory. Just there, in the silence between thoughts. I've never told anyone this, but I think I know what it was. What Holloway was. It was all of us. Every trainee who ever stood in that courtyard and wondered if they'd make it. Every person who felt like they were being watched, evaluated, tested, in ways that went beyond the official curriculum. Every agent who graduated and spent the rest of their career wondering if they'd really earned it, or if they'd just been lucky enough to avoid whatever trap was waiting in the shadows. Holloway wasn't a person. Holloway was a question. The question we were all too afraid to ask. Are you really here? Are you really who you think you are? Or are you just a name on a roster called into existence every morning and dismissed just as easily? I don't have an answer. I don't think anyone does. But every now and then I'll be standing in line at the grocery store or sitting in a coffee shop, and I'll hear someone say a name that makes me turn around. Not because I recognize it, but because it has that same quality, that same absence behind it. And I wonder if they graduated from Quantico too. If they stood in that courtyard and heard their name called and answered automatically, never questioning whether they were really there, or just another administrative error waiting to be corrected. I wonder if they remember someone named Holloway. I wonder if they dream about that voice. I wonder if they're still trying to find the roster, to prove it was real, to show someone, anyone, that they're not crazy, that it happened, that there really was something wrong with that place. I wonder if they're still looking. Like I am. Like I always will be. I came to Quantico in early March, when the Virginia woods were just beginning to show signs of spring. The trees were still mostly bare, but there was something in the air that suggested warmth was coming. I'd spent 6 years as a detective in Phoenix before applying to the Bureau. The transition from desert heat to East Coast humidity would take some getting used to, but I was ready for it, ready for the challenge. The academy looked exactly like the photos I'd studied during my application process. Red brick buildings arranged in a grid, surrounded by forests that seemed to go on forever. Professional, institutional, permanent. This was where they made federal agents, where they separated the capable from the merely ambitious. Our class was designated NAT Session 2608. 40 trainees total. We came from different backgrounds: local law enforcement, military, private sector. The Bureau wanted diversity of experience. They got it. On the first day, during initial orientation, we sat in a lecture hall and listened to the academy director explain what the next 22 weeks would entail. "You will be tested," he said, his voice carrying easily through the room. "Not just physically or academically, but psychologically. We need to know how you think, how you respond under pressure, how you adapt when circumstances change. Some of these tests will be obvious. Others will not." He paused, letting that sink in. "By the time you leave here, we will know everything about you that matters. And you will know whether you truly belong in this organization." After the lecture, we were divided into smaller groups for administrative processing. My group consisted of 10 trainees. We were assigned to the same dormitory building, the same class schedule, the same physical training unit. For the next several months, these 9 strangers would be the people I saw most often. One of them introduced himself as Wyatt. Former Army intelligence. Tall, lean, with the kind of quiet confidence that comes from having already proven yourself in difficult situations. We shook hands. His grip was firm without being aggressive. "First time on the East Coast?" he asked. "That obvious? You keep looking at the trees like they might do something." I laughed. "In Arizona, we have trees. They're just smaller and farther apart. You'll get used to it. Give it a week." Another trainee joined us. Her name was Sullivan. Former NYPD detective, she said. 10 years on the job before deciding the Bureau offered better opportunities. She had sharp eyes that seemed to catalog everything, the kind of attention to detail that probably made her good at police work. "They assign us rooms yet?" she asked. "Not yet," Wyatt said. "Should be soon." We waited in the lobby of the dormitory building while administrative staff worked through their paperwork. Eventually, they called my name and handed me a key. Room 214, second floor. I grabbed my duffel bag and climbed the stairs. The room was small but adequate. 2 beds, 2 desks, 2 closets. Everything bolted down or built into the walls. No personalization allowed. The window looked out over a running track, and beyond that, more trees. Always more trees. My roommate arrived about 20 minutes later. His name was Cole. He'd come from the DEA, he said. 5 years as a special agent before deciding to transfer to the FBI. We made small talk while unpacking. Where we were from, what brought us here, the usual. He seemed friendly enough, professional, like everyone else. That first week was administrative. Paperwork, medical exams, equipment issue, facility orientation. We learned where everything was: the dining hall, the library, the gym, the firing range. We memorized the daily schedule. Physical training at 0600. Classes from 0800 to 1700. Study time in the evenings. Lights out at 2200. The academy ran on military time and military precision. Everything had its place and its schedule. Deviation was not encouraged. On Friday of that first week, we had our introduction to the behavioral science unit. This was one of the academy's signature programs. Psychological training designed to help agents understand criminal behavior, interview techniques, threat assessment. We gathered in a classroom in the main academic building and waited for the instructor. He arrived exactly on time. Mid-50s, gray hair, wearing a suit that looked like it had been pressed that morning. He introduced himself as Instructor Garrett. 25 years with the Bureau, he said. 15 of those in the BSU. He'd interviewed serial killers, terrorists, cult leaders. He'd developed some of the interrogation protocols we'd be learning. Understanding human behavior is the foundation of investigative work, he began, walking slowly across the front of the room. You can have all the physical evidence in the world, but if you can't read people, if you can't understand their motivations and exploit their weaknesses, you'll never close the difficult cases. He stopped at the podium and looked at us. Over the next several weeks, you will learn the art of the interview. Not interrogation, not torture, not coercion. Interview. The voluntary exchange of information between two people, one of whom wants something the other possesses. He pulled up a slide on the projector. It showed a simple diagram. Two chairs facing each other across a table. This is your battlefield. Not dramatic, not exciting, but more important than any firearm you'll carry. In this room, with nothing but words, you will learn to dismantle lies, extract truth, and persuade people to act against their own interests. The slide changed. Now it showed a floor plan of a building. The Academy maintains several interview training facilities. You'll become very familiar with them. Each room is equipped with recording equipment. Every word you speak, every gesture you make will be documented. You'll review your performance. You'll learn from your mistakes. By the end of this training, you'll be able to read a subject like a book. He advanced to the next slide. A photograph of a long corridor lined with doors. Interview Suite Alpha. Ground floor of Building 12. This is where you'll spend a significant portion of your psychological training. Each door leads to an interview room. Each room is identical. Table, 2 chairs, recording equipment. We've found that consistency helps trainees focus on technique rather than environment. I studied the photograph. The corridor looked institutional, almost sterile. Fluorescent lights overhead. Tile floor. Metal doors with small windows. It could have been a hospital or a prison or any number of government facilities. Starting Monday, Garrett continued, you'll begin practical exercises. You'll work in pairs, taking turns as interviewer and subject. The scenarios will start simple and become progressively more complex. By week 12, you'll be conducting full interrogations of role players trained to resist questioning. He turned off the projector. Any questions? A trainee in the front row raised her hand. How are pairs assigned? Randomly. We'll post the assignments Sunday evening. Check the board in your dormitory. No other questions. Garrett dismissed us. As we filed out of the classroom, I found myself thinking about those interview rooms. Identical spaces, he'd said. Table, 2 chairs, recording equipment. Everything controlled. Everything documented. It made sense from a training perspective, but there was something unsettling about the idea of 40 trainees rotating through the same sterile rooms, playing out the same scenarios over and over. Cole caught up with me in the hallway. You ever done interview training before? Some, in Phoenix PD. Nothing this extensive. Should be interesting. I did a fair amount of interrogations with DEA, but their techniques are more aggressive. FBI's supposed to be more psychological. That's what I hear. We walked back to the dormitory together. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the academy grounds. In the distance, I could hear a group of trainees running through the woods, their cadence calls echoing through the trees. Everything felt normal, structured, exactly as it should be. That weekend, I explored the academy grounds, found the library, a quiet building filled with legal texts and case studies. Visited the gym, where off-duty trainees were working out. Walked the perimeter of the complex, noting the security measures. Cameras everywhere, fences, guards at the gates. This place took security seriously. Sunday evening, I checked the assignment board in the dormitory lobby. The interview training pairs had been posted. I scanned the list for my name. Paired with Sullivan, the former NYPD detective. That was fine. She seemed competent. Our first session was scheduled for Monday at 0900 hours. Interview Suite Alpha, Room 7. I went to bed early, wanting to be rested for the next day. Cole was already asleep, his breathing deep and even. Outside, the March wind moved through the trees, a sound I was slowly getting used to. The room was dark and warm and safe. I dreamed about corridors, long hallways stretching into darkness, doors on either side. I walked from one end to the other, opening each door, finding empty rooms behind them. Table, 2 chairs, nothing else, over and over. The dream had no narrative, no purpose, just the repetition of walking and opening doors and finding emptiness. I woke before my alarm, disoriented for a moment before remembering where I was. Quantico. Interview training today. I showered, dressed, grabbed my notebook and headed to breakfast. The dining facility was crowded, trainees from multiple sessions eating before their scheduled activities. I found an empty seat and worked through scrambled eggs and toast while reviewing my notes from Garrett's lecture. The fundamentals of interviewing, establishing rapport, reading body language, controlling the conversation. At 0845, I left the dining facility and walked to Building 12. It was located on the southern edge of the main complex, a 3-story structure that looked like it had been built in the 70s. The architecture was utilitarian, all right angles and concrete. I found Interview Suite Alpha on the ground floor. The corridor was exactly as it had appeared in Garrett's photograph. Fluorescent lights, tile floor, metal doors with small windows set at eye level. Numbers stenciled on each door, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Sullivan was already waiting outside room 7. She nodded as I approached. "Ready?" she asked. "As I'll ever be." She tried the door. It was locked. We waited. At exactly 0900, an instructor appeared. Not Garrett, someone else. He introduced himself as Instructor Harper, unlocked the door, and gestured for us to enter. The room was exactly as described. Small, maybe 10 by 10 feet. A metal table in the center, bolted to the floor. 2 metal chairs, also bolted down. One wall was mirrored glass, obviously one way. Recording equipment visible in the corners near the ceiling. "The scenario is simple," Harper said. "Sullivan, you're the interviewer. You're investigating a suspected fraud case. You," he looked at me, "are the subject. You may or may not be guilty. That's for you to decide. The exercise lasts 30 minutes. I'll be observing from the booth next door. Begin when you're ready." He left, closing the door behind him. Sullivan and I looked at each other across the table. "Shall we?" she said, taking the interviewer's chair. I sat opposite her. The chair was uncomfortable, designed that way on purpose. Everything about this room was designed to create a specific psychological effect. Sullivan began with basic questions: name, occupation, relationship to the alleged fraud. I answered cooperatively, playing the role of an innocent subject caught up in something I didn't understand. She was good at this, I noticed. Her questions were methodical, building a timeline, establishing facts, looking for inconsistencies. About 20 minutes in, something caught my attention. A sound from somewhere beyond the walls. Faint, like someone moving furniture in another room. I tried to ignore it, focusing on Sullivan's questions, but it persisted. A rhythmic scraping, as if a chair was being dragged across a floor. Sullivan paused. "Do you hear that?" "Yeah, probably another interview in progress." She nodded and continued, but the sound didn't stop. It grew louder, more distinct. Definitely a chair, being moved repeatedly, back and forth, back and forth. Then it stopped. Silence returned. Sullivan and I finished the exercise. When Harper opened the door at the 30-minute mark, I asked him about the noise. "What noise?" he said. "From another room. Sounded like furniture being moved." He frowned. "All the other rooms in this suite are empty. You were the only session scheduled for this morning." But we both heard it. "Probably the building's HVAC system," Harper said. "These old structures make all kinds of sounds. You'll get used to it." He led us out into the corridor. The doors to rooms 1 through 6 were all closed. I walked to the nearest one and looked through the window. Empty room. Table, 2 chairs, nobody inside. I checked the others. All empty. "Satisfied?" Harper asked. "Yeah, sorry, just curious." "Don't worry about it. Environmental sounds can be distracting during interviews. Part of the training is learning to maintain focus despite distractions. You'll do better next time." Sullivan and I left Building 12 together. Outside, the morning sun was bright, the air warming up. Normal spring day. "That was weird," she said. "The noise?" "Yeah. I could have sworn it was coming from the room next to ours." "Harper said the building makes sounds." "Maybe." She didn't sound convinced. "You have another session this week?" "Thursday, same room. Let me know if you hear it again." We went our separate ways. I had a class on federal law starting in 15 minutes. The rest of the day passed normally. Lectures, physical training, study time. By evening, I'd almost forgotten about the scraping sound, almost. That night, lying in bed, I found myself thinking about it. The way it had started and stopped so abruptly. The rhythmic quality of it. And the fact that Sullivan heard it too. That was important. If I'd been the only one, I could have dismissed it as imagination. But we both heard it. Harper's explanation made sense. Old building, HVAC system, acoustic quirks. Nothing unusual about that. I closed my eyes and tried to sleep. In my dreams, I was back in the interview room, but this time I was alone. Sitting in the subject's chair, facing the empty interviewer's chair. The door was closed. The mirror reflected the room back at me. And from somewhere beyond the walls, I could hear that sound again. Scraping. Rhythmic. Getting closer, I woke up sweating. Cole was still asleep. The room was dark and quiet. Outside, nothing but the usual night sounds. Wind, distant traffic, the hum of the dormitory's climate control. I checked my watch, 0300 hours. Too early to get up, too late to fall back into meaningful sleep. I lay there in the dark, listening to Cole's breathing, waiting for morning. The week continued. More classes, more training. Tuesday was firearms practice. Wednesday was a written exam on interview protocols. Thursday morning, I returned to Interview Suite Alpha for my second practical exercise. Different partner this time. A trainee named Briggs from the military background group. We were assigned to room 7 again. Same room, same setup. This time, I was the interviewer, Briggs the subject. The scenario involved a national security investigation. Potentially classified information leaked to foreign actors. Instructor Harper unlocked the door, gave us our instructions, left us alone. I began the interview. Briggs was less cooperative than I'd been with Sullivan. He deflected questions, demanded to know if he was under arrest, asked for a lawyer. All things a real subject might do. I tried different approaches, building rapport, applying pressure, creating doubt. 20 minutes in, the sound started again. Same scraping, same rhythm, from somewhere beyond the walls. Briggs stopped mid-sentence. "What is that?" "I heard it during my last session. Instructor said it's the building's HVAC. Doesn't sound like HVAC. I know." We both sat there listening. The sound continued for maybe 30 seconds, then stopped. We tried to resume the interview, but the moment was broken. The rest of the session felt forced, mechanical. When Harper opened the door, I asked him again about the noise. "You heard it too?" He looked genuinely surprised. "Yeah, same as Monday." "Interesting. I'll mention it to maintenance. Might be a loose duct or something." After the session, I went to the library instead of heading straight to lunch. I wanted to look up the building's history, see if there were any records of similar complaints. The Academy Library had a section dedicated to facility documentation. I found the files for Building 12. Constructed in 1974. Renovated in 1992. Interview Suite Alpha installed in 95 as part of an expansion of behavioral science training. No major structural issues reported. Regular maintenance logs showed nothing unusual. I was about to close the file when I noticed something. A floor plan from 95, showing the layout of Interview Suite Alpha. I studied it carefully. 7 rooms, numbered 1 through 7, arranged along a single corridor. All identical dimensions, all equipped with the same recording and observation setup. But there was a note in the margin, handwritten. Room 4 sealed pending review. Use rooms 1, 3, 5, 7 for training. Dated March 1996. I flipped through the subsequent pages looking for any explanation of why room 4 had been sealed or whether it had been reopened. Nothing. The maintenance logs after 1996 made no mention of room 4 at all. I closed the file and sat back in my chair. Room 4 sealed. But when I'd walked down that corridor, I'd seen 7 doors. All of them appeared identical. None of them marked as out of service. Maybe the note was outdated. Maybe room 4 had been reopened years ago and no one bothered to update the documentation. There was an easy way to check. I left the library and walked back to Building 12. The corridor was empty, all the interview rooms dark and unused. I walked slowly from one end to the other, counting doors. 1, 2, 3, 4, up, 6, 7. I stopped at room 4 and looked through the window. Inside, table, 2 chairs, recording equipment. Identical to room 7. Nothing to suggest it was sealed or out of service. I tried the handle, locked, like all the others. I stood there for a moment, staring through the window at that empty room, and felt something shift. A small wrongness, barely perceptible. Like when you walk into your house and can tell someone's been there, even though nothing is obviously out of place. "Can I help you?" I turned. Instructor Garrett was standing at the end of the corridor, watching me. "Just familiarizing myself with the facility," I said. He walked toward me, his footsteps echoing off the tile floor. "You're between sessions?" You should be at lunch. I was in the library, thought I'd take a look around. He stopped a few feet away. See anything interesting? Just interview rooms. He looked at the door I'd been examining. Room 4. Something flickered across his face, too quick to read. All the rooms are identical. Once you've seen one, you've seen them all. That's what I figured. Good. Don't be late for afternoon classes. He turned and walked away. I watched him go, noting the deliberate pace, the straight posture. When he reached the end of the corridor, he looked back. Just for a second. Then he was gone. I left Building 12 and went to lunch. The dining facility was crowded, but I found Cole and Wyatt sitting together. I joined them. "How's interview training going?" Wyatt asked. "Fine. Strange, but fine." "Strange how?" I told them about the noise, the scraping sound both Sullivan and I had heard. Cole listened without comment, but Wyatt nodded. "I heard something similar," he said. "During my session Tuesday, thought it was another interview in progress, but the instructor said all the other rooms were empty." "Which room were you in?" 7. Same room. 3 different trainees, 3 different sessions, all hearing the same sound. "Did you mention it to your instructor?" I asked. "Yeah, he said the same thing yours did. Building HVAC, old pipes, acoustic anomalies. You believe that?" Wyatt shrugged. "I believe buildings make noise. Why? You think it's something else?" "I don't know what I think." Cole had been quiet through this exchange. Now he spoke up. "Sounds like you're looking for problems. The academy has good facilities. If there was an issue with one of the buildings, they'd fix it. Don't overthink it." He was probably right. I was probably overthinking it. The Bureau had been operating this academy for decades. Thousands of agents had trained here. If there were serious problems with Building 12, someone would have addressed them by now. I finished my lunch and went to afternoon classes. Tried to focus on the lecture, on taking notes, on absorbing the information. But my mind kept wandering back to that corridor. To room 4. To the note in the margin of a 20-year-old floor plan. Room 4 sealed pending review. What review? Why seal it? And if it had been sealed, when was it reopened? Questions I couldn't answer. Questions I probably shouldn't be asking. But I couldn't let it go. April arrived with rain and warming temperatures. The trees around Quantico filled in with leaves, transforming the landscape from bare branches to dense green canopy. The academy settled into a steady rhythm. Physical training every morning, classes throughout the day, study sessions in the evening. Week after week, the routine ground us down and built us back up. Interview training continued. Twice a week, we returned to Building 12 to interview Suite Alpha, to those identical rooms with their metal tables and uncomfortable chairs. The exercises grew more complex, the scenarios more challenging. The instructors pushed us harder, looking for weaknesses in our techniques, gaps in our understanding. I kept hearing the sound. Not every session, but often enough that I started anticipating it. That scraping, rhythmic noise from somewhere beyond the walls. Sometimes it lasted only a few seconds. Sometimes it continued for minutes. Other trainees heard it too. We'd compare notes afterward, confirming each other's experiences, reassuring ourselves that we weren't imagining things. The instructors always had explanations. HVAC system, old pipes, acoustic quirks in the building's structure. Perfectly normal. Nothing to worry about. But there was something else, something I noticed but couldn't quite articulate. The explanations were always slightly different. Harper would say it was the HVAC. Garrett would blame the pipes. Another instructor, Morrison, suggested it might be sound carrying from the floor above. Small variations, but variations nonetheless, as if they were improvising rather than consulting an actual diagnosis of the problem. I started documenting it, kept a small notebook where I recorded each session: date, time, room number, which instructor supervised, whether I heard the noise, how long it lasted. After 6 weeks of interview training, I had 15 entries. 11 of them mentioned the sound. All 11 occurred in room 7. Never in rooms 1, 2, 3, 5, or 6. Always room 7. I showed my notes to Wyatt one evening. We were in the library, supposedly studying for an upcoming exam on interrogation law, but I couldn't focus. "You're keeping a log of building noises?" he said, reading through my entries. "Pattern recognition. They taught us that in week 1. They also taught us not to waste time on irrelevant details." "Is it irrelevant?" He handed back the notebook. "Probably. But I see your point. Always the same room. That's odd. More than odd. So, what are you thinking? The room is haunted? There's some secret training element we're not being told about?" "I'm thinking there's something wrong with room 7 that the instructors are aware of, but aren't addressing properly." "Then report it through proper channels. Fill out a facility complaint form." "I did, 2 weeks ago. Never heard back." Wyatt leaned back in his chair, studying me. "You're getting obsessed with this. Why?" "Good question. Why did it bother me so much? The sound was annoying, yes. The lack of a satisfactory explanation was frustrating, yes. But neither of those things justified the amount of mental energy I was devoting to it." "I don't know," I admitted. "It just feels wrong. Everything feels wrong when you're stressed and sleep-deprived. That's academy life. You push through it." He was right. Of course he was right. I closed my notebook and tried to refocus on studying. But that night, lying in bed, I kept thinking about room 7, about the scraping sound, about the note in the 95 floor plan that mentioned room 4 being sealed, and about the fact that room 7 was directly across the corridor from room 4. The next morning, before physical training, I made a detour to Building 12. The sun hadn't fully risen yet, the academy grounds still in that gray, pre-dawn light. The building was unlocked. It always was during operational hours, and I slipped inside. Interview suite Alpha was empty. All the doors closed, all the rooms dark. I walked to room 4 and looked through the window again. Same as before, table, 2 chairs, recording equipment. Nothing unusual. I tried the handle, still locked. Then I walked across the corridor to room 7 and looked through its window. Identical layout, identical equipment. From the corridor you couldn't tell any difference between the 2 rooms. But they shared a wall. Room 4 and room 7 were mirror images of each other, separated by maybe 18 inches of concrete and whatever else went into these walls. If something was happening in room 4, if it was being used for purposes other than what we'd been told, sound could carry through to room 7. The question was, what would be happening in a sealed room that would cause a rhythmic scraping sound? I heard footsteps behind me and turned. Instructor Garrett was walking down the corridor carrying a briefcase. "Early morning inspection?" he asked. "Couldn't sleep, thought I'd walk around." He stopped a few feet away. His expression was neutral, but there was something in his eyes. Evaluation, assessment. "You spend a lot of time in this building," he said. "More than the required training sessions." "I find the environment helps me think." "About what?" "Interview techniques, criminal psychology, what we're learning in class." "Nothing else?" I met his gaze. Should there be something else? For a moment, we just looked at each other. Then Garrett smiled, a thin expression that didn't reach his eyes. "The academy can be disorienting," he said. especially for trainees who are used to being in control of their environment. Here, everything is structured, scheduled, monitored. Some people find that claustrophobic. I'm managing fine. Are you? Because I've noticed you seem distracted lately. During lectures, during exercises, as if your mind is somewhere else. I'm focused on my training. Good. See that you stay focused. The Bureau doesn't need agents who get lost in irrelevant details. He walked past me, down the corridor, into one of the observation rooms. I heard the door close and lock. I left Building 12 and went to physical training. We ran 6 miles through the woods that morning. The exertion felt good, pushing my body hard enough that my mind had to quiet down. Just breathing and movement and the rhythm of feet on trail. After the run, after showering and breakfast, I had another interview session scheduled. Room 7, 0900 hours. Partner, Sullivan again. I was the interviewer this time. The scenario involved a corporate espionage case. Sullivan played the role of an employee suspected of stealing trade secrets. She was good at playing uncooperative, giving minimal responses, making me work for every piece of information. 15 minutes in, the sound started. Sullivan's eyes flicked toward the wall she was facing, the wall between room 7 and room 4. I kept questioning her, trying to maintain the exercise, but I was listening too. The scraping was louder this time, more distinct, and there was something else underneath it. A low sound, almost like breathing, rhythmic, in and out. "Do you hear that?" Sullivan whispered. "Stay in character," I said, more sharply than I intended. She blinked, startled, then nodded. We continued the interview, but the sounds didn't stop. Scraping, breathing. For the next 10 minutes, they persisted in the background, a constant distraction that made concentration nearly impossible. When Instructor Morrison opened the door at the 30-minute mark, I was ready to complain. But before I could speak, he said, "Good work maintaining focus despite the distraction. That's an important skill." "The distraction," I said. "You mean the noise from the room next door?" "There is no room next door. Room 6 is at the other end of the corridor." "Not room 6, room 4. The room directly behind that wall." I pointed at the wall Sullivan had been facing. Morrison's expression didn't change. "Room 4 isn't in use." "Why not?" "Maintenance issues. It's been out of commission for years. But I can see into it from the corridor. It looks operational. The structure is sound. The equipment is not. We're waiting on budget approval for upgrades before reopening it." Sullivan spoke up. "If the room isn't in use, why were there sounds coming from it?" "The sounds you heard were from the HVAC system. The ductwork runs through that wall, creates acoustic anomalies." The same explanation. Slightly different wording, but the same basic message. Nothing unusual. Nothing to worry about. After the session, Sullivan and I walked back to the main complex together. "That was bullshit," she said quietly. "Which part?" "All of it. The HVAC explanation, the maintenance issue story. Something's not right about that room." "I know. What are you going to do about it?" "I don't know yet." We parted ways at the dormitory. I went to my room, intending to change before lunch, but found Cole sitting on his bed with a serious expression. "We need to talk," he said. I closed the door. "About what?" "About you. About the fact that you're spending all your time obsessing over a room in Building 12 instead of focusing on your training." "Who told you that? Does it matter?" "The instructors are talking. They think you're having adjustment issues, paranoia, stress-related delusions. I'm not delusional. Other people hear the sounds too." "So what? Buildings make noise? It's not a conspiracy." "I never said it was a conspiracy." "Then what is it? What do you think is happening in room 4 that's so important you're willing to risk your entire career at the Bureau to investigate it? I didn't have a good answer. Because the truth was, I didn't know what I thought was happening. I just knew something was wrong. Something that the official explanations didn't account for. I'm not risking anything, I said. I'm asking legitimate questions about a facility issue. You're making yourself a problem, and the Bureau doesn't like problems. They especially don't like trainees who can't follow the program without creating drama. He stood up and grabbed his jacket. I'm telling you this as a friend. Drop it. Stop going to Building 12 when you don't have sessions. Stop questioning the instructors. Focus on graduating. Because if you don't, you're going to wash out, and that would be a waste. He left. I sat on my bed, staring at the wall, feeling the weight of his words. He was right. Of course he was right. I was jeopardizing my career over building acoustics. It was absurd, but I couldn't let it go. That night I made a decision. I would find out what was in room 4, not through official channels, which clearly weren't going to give me answers. Through direct observation. I waited until 0200 hours, when the academy was at its quietest. Cole was asleep. I dressed in dark clothes, grabbed a small flashlight, and slipped out of the dormitory. The walk to Building 12 took 15 minutes. The grounds were mostly deserted at this hour. Just a few security patrols that I avoided easily. The building itself was locked after hours, but I'd noticed during my previous visits that one of the side entrances had a faulty latch. It took me less than a minute to get inside. Interview Suite Alpha was dark. I used my flashlight sparingly, just enough to navigate. Made my way to room 4. The door was locked, as expected, but the lock was standard issue, nothing sophisticated. I'd learned basic lockpicking during my time with Phoenix PD. It took me about 3 minutes to work the mechanism. The door opened. I stepped inside and closed it behind me. Used my flashlight to sweep the room. Table. 2 chairs. Recording equipment in the corners. Exactly like room 7. Exactly like all the others. Except there was something on the table. A file folder. I approached it carefully, half expecting some kind of alarm to sound. Nothing happened. I opened the folder. Inside were photographs. Black and white surveillance photos, the kind taken from a distance with a telephoto lens. They showed trainees around the academy grounds. Some were candid shots. People walking to class, sitting in the dining hall, exercising. Others were more formal, identification photos, the kind taken during processing. I flipped through them, recognizing faces. Wyatt, Sullivan, Cole, others from our session, and me. Several photos of me, entering Building 12, walking across the courtyard, sitting in the library. Under the photos were documents, interview transcripts, not from our training exercises but from somewhere else. Different questions, different scenarios. The format was similar to what we'd been practicing, but the content was wrong. Personal questions, psychological evaluations, things that went beyond standard training. I photographed several pages with my phone, trying to work quickly, aware that I'd already been in here too long. Then I heard it, from somewhere above me. Footsteps. I froze, listening. The footsteps moved across the ceiling, from one end of the room to the other, stopped directly overhead. Then I heard something else, a scraping sound, metal on concrete. The same sound we'd been hearing during training sessions. It was coming from the floor above, not from room 4, but from whatever space existed directly above it. I left the folder on the table exactly as I'd found it, and moved to the door. Listened. The corridor outside was silent. I opened the door carefully and looked out. Empty. I locked the door behind me and made my way to the stairwell, climbed to the second floor. The layout here was different. Administrative offices instead of interview rooms. All the doors were labeled. Records, equipment, storage. I found the room that should have been directly above room 4. The door was unmarked. I tried the handle. Locked. The footsteps started again. From inside that room, moving back and forth, and that scraping sound, louder now, unmuffled by floors and walls. I put my ear against the door, listened. Someone was in there, working on something, moving furniture, equipment. The activity had a methodical quality, repetitive and purposeful. I knocked. Softly. The sounds stopped immediately. Silence. I knocked again. Waited. Nothing. I tried the door one more time, still locked. Whatever was happening in that room, whoever was in there, they weren't coming out. I left Building 12 the same way I'd entered. Made it back to my dormitory without encountering anyone. Cole was still asleep. I changed quietly and got into bed. But I didn't sleep. I lay there in the dark, thinking about what I'd found. The photographs, the transcripts, the room on the second floor where someone had been working in the middle of the night, and the fact that all of it connected somehow to room 4. The room that had been sealed in 996. The room that was supposedly out of commission due to equipment issues. The room that contained active files on current trainees. Something was happening at the academy. Something beyond the official training program. And whatever it was, it involved that room. The question was, what should I do about it? The answer came the next morning, during an unscheduled meeting with Instructor Garrett. He called me into his office at 0800 hours. I arrived to find him sitting behind his desk with my personnel file open in front of him. "Close the door," he said. I did. Sat in the chair he indicated. "We have a problem," he began. "Several instructors have expressed concern about your recent behavior. Obsessive interest in facility details, repeated questions about room 4, difficulty maintaining focus during training exercises. I've been asking legitimate questions about things that aren't relevant to your training, about things that have been adequately explained multiple times. The explanations don't match the evidence." He closed the file. "What evidence? Building noises, locked doors? These are normal features of any large facility. There are photographs in room 4, surveillance photos of trainees." His expression didn't change. "How would you know what's in room 4? The room has been secured for weeks." I realized my mistake immediately. I'd just admitted to breaking into a restricted space. Garrett leaned back in his chair. "I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I need you to answer honestly. Did you enter room 4 without authorization?" I could lie, deny everything, but he already knew. This was a test of a different kind. "Yes," I said. "When?" "Last night, 0200 hours. "And you saw photographs?" "Yes." "Did it occur to you that those photographs might be part of a training exercise? That we might be testing your observational skills, your judgment, your ability to respect boundaries? Is that what they were? I'm not going to validate your unauthorized entry by answering that question. What I'm going to do is give you a choice. You can accept that this is part of your training, stop asking questions, and focus on graduating. Or you can continue down this path and wash out, because that's where this leads. Not to answers, not to some grand revelation, just to a premature end to your FBI career." I sat there processing this. Everything he'd said made sense on the surface. The academy was known for psychological testing, for pushing trainees in unexpected ways. It was possible that the entire situation with room 4 was orchestrated. a test of discretion, judgment, respect for authority. But the way Garrett was watching me suggested something else. This wasn't a training exercise, this was a warning. "I'll focus on graduating," I said. "Good choice. You're dismissed." I left his office and went to class. Spent the rest of the day trying to concentrate on lectures and exercises. That night, I deleted the photos I'd taken from my phone. Threw away my notebook with all the documented observations. Cole was right. I was risking everything over something I couldn't change and didn't fully understand. I needed to let it go. But as I lay in bed that night, I kept thinking about those photographs. About the transcripts. About the locked room on the second floor where someone had been working at 0200 hours. And I knew I wasn't going to let it go. I just needed to be more careful about how I pursued it. May brought humid heat and the accelerated pace of advanced training. We were past the halfway point now, deep into specialized instruction. Firearms proficiency testing, tactical driving courses, undercover operations simulations. The days blurred together in a haze of exhaustion and adrenaline. I stopped going to Building 12 outside of required sessions. Stopped asking questions about Room 4. Played the part of a trainee who had seen the error of his ways and refocused on the program. The instructors seemed satisfied. My performance evaluations improved. Cole stopped giving me concerned looks. But I hadn't stopped investigating. I just changed my approach. Instead of direct observation, I started gathering information indirectly. Conversations with other trainees. Casual questions that seemed like normal curiosity. I learned that several people from our session had been called in for supplemental interviews by BSU instructors. Not as part of regular training, but special one-on-one sessions scheduled outside normal hours. Wyatt had one. So did Sullivan. A trainee named Porter. Another named Reed. When I asked what the interviews were about, they all gave variations of the same answer. Psychological evaluation, career counseling, nothing unusual. But there was something in their expressions when they said it. A careful neutrality that suggested they'd been told not to discuss it. I checked the library records, looking for any documentation of these supplemental interviews. Found nothing. Checked the official training schedule. No mention of them. They were happening off the books, outside the formal curriculum. One evening in mid-May, I was studying in the library when Sullivan sat down across from me. She looked tired, shadows under her eyes. "Can I ask you something?" she said quietly. "Sure. Have you had any weird dreams lately?" I set down my pen. Define weird. About the interview rooms. About Building 12. About being watched. Why? She glanced around, making sure no one was nearby. Because I have. Every night for the past 2 weeks. And I can't tell if it's just stress or if something else is going on. What happens in the dreams? I'm in one of the interview rooms, usually room 7. I'm sitting at the table, but I can't move. And someone's watching from behind the mirror. I can feel them watching. Then I hear sounds from the room next door. The scraping. But when I try to leave, the door won't open. The same dream I'd been having, almost word for word. "You're not the only one," I said. "What do you mean?" "I've had similar dreams. So has Wyatt. And Porter mentioned something about nightmares, though he didn't go into detail." Sullivan leaned forward. "That's not normal. 4 people from the same training session having the same nightmares. That doesn't just happen. It could be suggestion. We're all experiencing the same stressful environment. Our minds process it the same way. Or something in that building is affecting us. Like what? Toxic mold, infrasound. I don't know. But I do know that every time I have one of those supplemental interviews, the dreams get worse. Where do they conduct the interviews? Building 12, second floor. A room I'd never been in before. It's set up differently than the regular interview rooms. More comfortable chairs, different lighting, and they record everything. But they told me the recordings are for research purposes only. Won't be part of my official file. Research into what? They didn't say. Just asked a lot of questions about my thoughts, my feelings, my reactions to different scenarios. It felt more like therapy than training. I thought about the room on the second floor. The unmarked door. The sounds I'd heard at 0200 hours. "Sullivan," I said carefully, "if I told you I thought something genuinely wrong was happening here, would you believe me?" She was quiet for a moment. "Yeah, I would, because I think so too." We looked at each other across the library table. Two trainees who had independently reached the same disturbing conclusion. "What do we do?" she asked. "We gather evidence. Real evidence, not just suspicions. And we find out what's actually happening in that building." Over the next week, Sullivan and I coordinated our efforts. She focused on the supplemental interviews, trying to remember every detail, every question asked. I focused on the building itself, its layout, its access points, its patterns of use. Wyatt joined our informal investigation after Sullivan told him what we'd discussed. He was skeptical at first, but his skepticism faded when we compared notes and realized how many anomalies we'd all experienced. We met in the library late at night, when most trainees were asleep. Shared observations, built a timeline, and slowly a pattern emerged. The supplemental interviews started 3 weeks into training. They were conducted with trainees who had been assigned to Room 7 for their initial sessions. Only Room 7, never the other rooms in Interview Suite Alpha. The dreams started after the interviews, within days, sometimes hours. And there was something else, a detail so subtle we almost missed it. During regular training sessions in Room 7, time felt off. Exercises that should have lasted 30 minutes felt shorter or longer. Not dramatically, just enough to be noticeable when you check the clock afterward. Time perception distortion, Wyatt said. Classic sign of psychological manipulation. Or drugs, Sullivan added. Something in the air system, mild hallucinogen or dissociative. That's illegal, I said. So is unauthorized psychological experimentation. But if that's what's happening, they'd need consent. Some kind of waiver we signed without realizing what it was for. We went back through our orientation paperwork. Hundreds of pages of forms we'd signed on our first day. Most of it standard. Background checks, security clearances, medical releases. But buried in the middle, we found it. A single paragraph in a document labeled Advanced Training Authorization. I consent to participate in research studies conducted by the Behavioral Science Unit for the purpose of improving FBI training methodologies. I understand that some research activities may not be disclosed in advance, and that participation is voluntary, but may affect training outcomes. We'd all signed it. We'd all consented to being research subjects without fully understanding what that meant. "This is insane," Sullivan said. "It's legal," Wyatt countered. "Barely, but legal. They got our consent." "For what? To mess with our heads? To give us nightmares? To do whatever they're doing in Room 4 on the second floor?" "We don't know what they're doing, not for certain." "Then we find out." I'd been dreading this moment, but I knew it was necessary. "I think I need to go back into Room 4, look at those files more carefully, see if there's any documentation of what the actual research involves." "Too risky," Wyatt said. "If you get caught again, you're out. If we don't get answers, we're just going to keep spiraling. I'd rather risk getting caught than spend the rest of my career wondering if the Bureau experimented on me during training." Sullivan nodded. "I'll go with you. 2 people can search faster than 1. We planned it for the following night, Friday. when security would be lighter due to weekend staffing patterns. Wyatt would keep watch from outside the building, text us if anyone approached. At 0100 hours, we met outside the dormitory, dressed in dark clothes, flashlights in our pockets, phones on silent. The walk to Building 12 was tense but uneventful. Wyatt took up position near the side entrance while Sullivan and I went inside. The corridor of Interview Suite Alpha was even more unsettling at night. Emergency lighting cast long shadows. The air felt stale, recycled too many times. I picked the lock on room 4 again. It went faster this time, muscle memory from my previous visit. Sullivan and I entered and closed the door behind us. The folder was still on the table. I opened it while Sullivan used her phone to photograph everything. More surveillance photos. More transcripts. But this time I looked more carefully at the documents underneath. They were research reports, dated throughout the current training session. Observational notes on trainee behavior, physiological responses, psychological assessments. The language was clinical, detached. Subject 14 shows increased stress markers during Room 7 sessions. Elevated heart rate, pupil dilation, perspiration. Responds well to ambient sound conditioning. Recommend continued exposure. Subject 22 demonstrates resistance to protocol. Multiple instances of unauthorized investigation. Consider additional intervention or removal from study. Subject 22. I checked the identification number against the photos. It was me. Sullivan was photographing the documents as quickly as she could. "This is incredible," she whispered. "They're literally documenting how they're manipulating us." I found another report, this one more recent, dated 3 days ago. Room 4. Protocol update. Ambient sound transmission successful in 78% of sessions. Subjects report auditory phenomena consistent with conditioning objectives. Time distortion effects noted in 64% of subjects. No adverse medical events. Recommend continuation through graduation. "They're doing it on purpose," I said. "The sounds, the time distortion, all of it." "But why?" Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. Text from Wyatt. "Someone coming. Get out now." We left everything as we'd found it and moved to the door. I looked through the window. The corridor was still empty, but I could hear footsteps approaching from somewhere in the building. We slipped out, locked the door behind us, and moved quickly toward the exit. But the footsteps were getting closer, coming from the direction we needed to go. Sullivan pointed to a maintenance closet. We ducked inside and pulled the door almost closed, leaving just enough gap to see out. Instructor Garrett appeared in the corridor. He was carrying a briefcase and walking with purpose. He stopped outside room 4, unlocked it, and went inside. Through the crack in the door, we watched him. He went straight to the folder on the table, opened it, flipped through the contents, checking if anything had been disturbed. He pulled out his phone and made a call. We couldn't hear what he said, but his body language suggested urgency. After a few minutes, he left room 4 and walked toward the stairwell. We waited until his footsteps faded, then carefully emerged from the closet. "He knows someone was in there," Sullivan said. "Maybe. Or he's just doing a routine check." At 0100 hours, we got out of Building 12 as fast as we could without running. Found Wyatt waiting outside, agitated. "What took so long?" he demanded. "Garrett showed up. We had to hide." "Did he see you?" "No, but he went into room 4. He might know someone's been accessing it." "Then we need to assume you're compromised. They'll be watching you now." We walked back to the dormitory separately, trying not to draw attention. In my room, Cole was asleep. I got into bed fully dressed, my heart still racing, my mind processing everything we'd discovered. The Bureau was conducting psychological research on trainees without their informed consent, using Room 7 as a conditioning environment. creating auditory phenomena, distorting time perception, monitoring our responses, documenting everything. The question was why? What was the research objective? What were they training us for that required this kind of manipulation? I didn't sleep that night. Just lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to Cole's breathing, waiting for someone to knock on the door and tell me I was expelled. The knock came at 0600 hours. Not expulsion. Summons. Instructor Garrett wants to see you immediately. I got dressed and followed the messenger to Building 12. Garrett's office was on the second floor, the same floor as that unmarked room where I'd heard sounds during my previous unauthorized visit. He was waiting behind his desk when I entered. His expression was carefully neutral. "Sit down." I sat. "We have security footage," he said, without preamble, "of you and trainee Sullivan entering Interview Suite Alpha last night without authorization. For the second time in your case." I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. "You were warned after your first violation. You chose to ignore that warning, and you involved another trainee, which makes this even more serious. We were investigating. You were trespassing, breaking and entering, violating the terms of your training agreement. These are grounds for immediate dismissal." He opened a folder on his desk. Inside, I could see documents. Termination paperwork, probably. "However," he continued, "the behavioral science unit has a different perspective. They see your initiative as potentially valuable. Your investigative instincts are good. Your observational skills are excellent. You identified anomalies that most trainees miss entirely." I blinked. This wasn't the conversation I'd expected. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying we'd like to offer you a choice. You can accept termination and leave the academy today. Or you can agree to participate fully in the BSU research program, with complete awareness of what it entails, and continue your training." "What does it entail?" He pulled out another document. "This is a detailed consent form. It explains the nature of the psychological research being conducted, the methodologies, the objectives, the potential risks and benefits. If you agree to participate, you'll continue training as normal. You'll graduate with your class, and you'll have contributed to important research that will improve FBI training for future generations. And if I refuse, you'll be dismissed for violating academy regulations. Your application to the Bureau will be permanently denied. You'll return to whatever career you had before Quantico." I took the document and read it carefully. It was remarkably candid. The BSU was studying advanced psychological conditioning techniques for high-stress operational environments. They were using Interview Suite Alpha, specifically Room 7, as a laboratory. The ambient sounds were indeed artificially generated. The time distortion was induced through environmental manipulation that wasn't further specified. The supplemental interviews were intensive psychological assessments. The objective, according to the document, was to determine whether trainees could be conditioned to maintain performance under extreme psychological pressure while retaining the ability to question and investigate anomalies, a balance between compliance and critical thinking essential for undercover operations. "Room 4, I said. "What's its role in this?" "Room 4 is the control center, where we monitor Room 7 sessions, where we generate the conditioning stimuli, where we store research data." "And the room above it? The unmarked room on the second floor?" Garrett's expression flickered. "You've been very thorough. That room is where we conduct advanced analysis, late-night research sessions when the building is otherwise unused. Why not just tell us from the beginning? Why make it secret?" "Because the research is testing whether trainees can identify and investigate psychological manipulation while it's happening to them. If we told you in advance, the results would be meaningless. We need authentic responses. I set down the document. So, everyone who's been in room 7, we're all part of this? Not everyone. Only those who demonstrated specific psychological profiles during initial screening. You, Sullivan, Wyatt, Porter, Reed, and a few others. About 15 trainees from your session. And the rest? Standard training. They use rooms 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6. Only our research subjects use room 7. I thought about this. It made a kind of sense. The Bureau would want to test new training methodologies before implementing them broadly. Using a subset of trainees as a pilot group was logical, but it still felt wrong. The deception, the manipulation, the fact that we'd signed consent forms without understanding what we were consenting to. What happens if I sign this and continue the program? You complete training, graduate, get assigned to a field office. The research data becomes part of the BSU archives. You move on with your career. And if I refuse, you leave today. Everything you've learned here remains classified. You don't discuss it with anyone, ever, or face federal prosecution for disclosing classified research. I looked at the consent form again. My signature would mean accepting that I'd been experimented on, that it would continue, and that I was okay with it. But refusing meant giving up everything I'd worked for. My career with the Bureau. My future as a federal agent. All of it gone because I couldn't accept being a research subject. Some choice. I need time to think about this, I said. You have until 1700 hours today. After that, we proceed with termination. I left his office and walked through the academy grounds in a daze. Sullivan and Wyatt were waiting at the library. I told them everything. They offered me the same choice, Sullivan said. I haven't decided yet. Me too, Wyatt added. It's manipulative as hell, but I also understand why they're doing it. Do you? I asked. Because I'm not sure I do. The Bureau sends agents into situations where they'll be deceived, manipulated, psychologically attacked. If we can't handle that during training, in a controlled environment, how will we handle it in the field? By having a choice, Sullivan said, by knowing what we're getting into, not by being tricked. But that's the point, Wyatt argued. You can't know what you're getting into. Real psychological warfare doesn't come with warnings. This is the closest they can get to realistic preparation. We argued about it for hours. The ethics, the legality, the necessity. None of us could agree on whether what the BSU was doing was justified or simply wrong. By 1600 hours, I still hadn't decided. I walked back to Building 12 to Garrett's office with the unsigned consent form in my hand. He looked up as I entered. Have you made a decision? I have questions first. Ask. The dreams, the nightmares about room 7, are those part of the conditioning? No. Those are unintended side effects. Some subjects process the experience through dreams. It's not harmful, just uncomfortable. What about long-term effects? Will this conditioning stay with me after graduation? Unknown. This is experimental research. We're still gathering data. So, I could be affected by this for the rest of my career, and you don't know how. That's true of any training. You don't know how it will shape you long-term. This is just more intensive. I set the form on his desk, unsigned. I can't do this, I said. I can't consent to something when you can't tell me what the long-term consequences are. It's not informed consent if you don't have the information. Garrett nodded slowly. I understand. I'll begin processing your termination. Wait. I picked up the form again. If I sign this, do I have to continue in the research program, or can I just complete training normally? You continue in the program. That's the condition. Then I'm out. I left his office for the last time. went back to my dormitory and started packing. Cole came in while I was folding clothes into my duffel bag. "What's going on?" he asked. "I'm leaving, washing out." "Why? What happened?" I couldn't tell him, not without violating the classification restrictions Garrett had mentioned. So I just said, "It wasn't the right fit. I'm going back to Phoenix." He looked genuinely sad. "That's too bad. You were doing well." "Not well enough, apparently." I finished packing and walked to the administrative building to process my departure. Signed more forms, turned in my equipment, received a final briefing on my obligations regarding classified information. By 2000 hours, I was in a rental car, driving away from Quantico. In my rearview mirror, the academy lights faded into the Virginia woods. I felt relief and regret, and a nagging question that wouldn't leave me alone. Had I made the right choice? I returned to Phoenix and tried to resume my old life. Got my detective job back with the police department. Moved into a small apartment near downtown. Fell back into familiar routines. But nothing felt the same. The dreams continued. Every few nights I'd find myself back in room 7, sitting at that metal table, hearing sounds from the room next door. Sometimes the door would open and Garrett would walk in. Sometimes it was Sullivan or Wyatt. Sometimes I was alone. Always, I felt like I was being watched. After 6 months, I couldn't take it anymore. I started looking for answers, called Sullivan, who had signed the consent form and graduated. She was assigned to the Detroit field office. "How are you doing?" I asked. "Fine," she said. Her voice sounded strained. "Really?" Long pause. "No, not fine. The dreams haven't stopped, and sometimes during regular interviews, I hear things. Sounds that aren't there. My supervisor thinks I'm having auditory hallucinations. They sent me to a psychologist." "What did the psychologist say?" "That it's PTSD from academy training, which is probably true. But they don't know about the BSU research. I can't tell them." "Classification. Does it affect your work?" "Sometimes. I can manage it, mostly." We talked for another 20 minutes. She told me about Wyatt, who had also graduated but was struggling with similar issues. About Porter, who'd had a breakdown during his first field assignment and was on medical leave. About Reed, who'd washed out during week 18 for reasons no one would specify. The research program had consequences. The BSU knew it. They were documenting it. And they were continuing anyway because the data was valuable. I called Garrett, left a message at the academy. He called back 2 days later. "I wondered when I'd hear from you," he said. "I need to know something. The trainees who participated in the research and graduated, are they okay?" Define okay. "Are they experiencing long-term psychological effects?" "Some are. We're monitoring them, providing support when needed." "Support like what? Therapy? Medication?" "Both, in some cases. But overall, they're performing well in their assignments. The conditioning is working as intended." "And the side effects? The dreams, the auditory phenomena?" "Those are acceptable costs given the benefits. These agents are more resilient, more capable of operating under psychological pressure. They're exactly what the Bureau needs." "Did you know this would happen? When you designed the program?" "We anticipated some effects. Not the specific manifestations, but the general principle. You can't condition someone without changing them." I was quiet for a moment, processing this. "If I'd signed the consent form, would you have told me this?" "Eventually, after graduation. We provide full debriefing to research participants once they've completed the program. So they find out what was done to them after it's too late to back out. That's one way to look at it." I hung up, sat in my apartment staring at nothing, trying to decide what to do with this information. I couldn't go public. The research was classified. Any disclosure would result in federal prosecution. But I couldn't just ignore it either. People I'd trained with were suffering because of this program. I started documenting everything I remembered, wrote it down in detail, the observations, the sounds, the dreams, the research reports I'd seen in room 4, the choice Garrett had given me. I put it all in a sealed envelope and left it with my attorney. Instructions to open it only if something happened to me or if the BSU research became public through other means. Then I tried to move on, but Quantico wouldn't let me go. 2 years after I left the academy, I got a call from Sullivan. She sounded shaken. "Did you hear about Wyatt?" she asked. "No. What happened?" "He killed himself. 2 weeks ago. Drove out to the woods and shot himself. They're calling it depression, but I think it was the research. The conditioning, it broke something in him." I felt cold. "Did he leave a note?" "Nothing, just gone." We were quiet for a while. Then Sullivan said, "I think we need to do something. Tell someone. Get the program shut down." "We can't. It's classified. People are dying. One person that we know of. One is too many." She was right, but I didn't know what we could do. The Bureau had covered every angle. The consent forms, the classification, the institutional support for the research. Unless, what if we went to the Office of Professional Responsibility? I suggested. Reported it as an ethics violation. With what evidence? We signed consent forms. We agreed to participate. You did. I didn't. You were offered the choice. Under duress. Sign or get expelled. That's not voluntary consent. Sullivan considered this. It might work, but it would probably end your career, and mine, and anyone else who participated in the complaint. I don't have a career with the Bureau anymore. I washed out, remember? Then why do you care? Good question. Why did I care? I'd walked away, started over, built a decent life in Phoenix. But I couldn't stop thinking about Wyatt, about the dreams that wouldn't end, about future trainees who might go through the same program, experience the same conditioning, face the same consequences. Because it's wrong, I said, and someone needs to say so. Over the next 6 months, Sullivan and I built a case, quietly, carefully. We contacted other research subjects, gathered their stories, documented the effects they were experiencing. Not everyone wanted to participate. Some were afraid of retaliation. Others had convinced themselves that what happened was necessary and justified. But we found enough. 8 former trainees willing to file a complaint with OPR. 8 people describing similar experiences, similar symptoms, similar concerns about the BSU research program. We submitted the complaint in March, exactly 3 years after I'd arrived at Quantico. The investigation took 4 months. OPR interviewed witnesses, reviewed documents, examined the consent procedures. In the end, they concluded that the research was problematic but within legal parameters. The consent forms were adequate, if barely. The classification was properly maintained. The monitoring of long-term effects was ongoing. Recommended actions: improve informed consent procedures, increase psychological support for research participants, consider ending the program after current cohort completes. Consider. Not require. Not mandate. Consider. The research continued. Still continues as far as I know. With improved consent forms, better psychological screening, more support for trainees who experience adverse effects, but fundamentally unchanged. I think about that sometimes, about the choice I made, about whether I should have signed the consent form, graduated, become part of the system from inside where I might have had more influence. But I also think about Wyatt, about the dreams that still wake me up sometimes, even though I only spent 11 weeks at Quantico, about the sound of scraping from a room that shouldn't have been occupied, about room 4, the room that wasn't there according to official records, the room that was sealed in '96 and never reopened according to maintenance logs, the room that I entered twice and saw research documents that proved the whole program was real. I still have copies of those documents, saved on an encrypted drive, hidden where no one will find them unless I want them found. Insurance, maybe. Evidence, definitely. Proof that what happened to us was real. Not imagination. Not stress-induced hallucination. Real. Last year, I got an email from an unknown address. No text, just an attachment. A photograph. It showed Interview Suite Alpha, the corridor with its numbered doors. But something was different. I counted the doors carefully. 6 rooms. Not 7. 6. Rooms 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, and 7. Room 4 was gone. Not sealed, not marked as out of service. Gone. The corridor was continuous with no gap where a door should have been, as if room 4 had never existed. I called Sullivan, described the photograph. "That's impossible," she said. "We were both in room 4. We saw the research reports." "I know. So what? They renovated the building? Removed the room? Maybe. Or maybe it was never there to begin with. We have photographs from when we were inside. Do we? Check your phone. Check your backups." She was quiet for a long time. Then, "They're gone. All the photos I took in room 4. They're not in my cloud storage, not in my deleted folder, just gone." "Same here. I checked before I called you." We both knew what this meant. Someone had accessed our devices remotely, deleted specific files, left everything else intact. The Bureau was covering its tracks, removing evidence, making sure that if we ever tried to prove what happened, we'd have nothing but our own testimony. 2 unreliable witnesses with documented psychological issues claiming they entered a room that doesn't exist. Who would believe us? I still dream about Quantico, about walking down that corridor, counting doors, about the sounds from the room next door, about sitting in the interviewer's chair and feeling watched. But now, in the dreams, when I look at the wall between room 7 and the space where room 4 used to be, I see something different. I see myself on the other side of the mirror, looking back, and I don't know which version is real. The one sitting in the chair, or the one behind the glass, watching, recording, taking notes. Maybe both, maybe neither. Maybe the research never ended. Maybe it just changed format. Maybe I'm still in room 7, still being tested, still being conditioned. Maybe I never left. Sometimes, late at night, I hear a sound. Faint, rhythmic, like a chair being scraped across a floor. I tell myself it's the building, the pipes, the HVAC system. I tell myself it's nothing, but I know better. I know exactly what it is. The sound of someone working in a room that doesn't exist, conducting research that isn't happening, documenting subjects who think they're free. The sound of room 4, still operational, still monitoring, still there, even though it isn't, especially because it isn't. The briefing happened on a Wednesday afternoon in late October. We'd been at Quantico for 14 weeks. All 43 trainees from our session assembled in an unfamiliar lecture hall at the far edge of the academy complex. The instructor who entered wasn't one of our regulars. He introduced himself as Coordinator Mason. Mid-40s, buzz cut going gray, extensive field experience evident in his bearing. "What I'm about to describe is classified training," he began. "You will not discuss it with anyone outside official academy channels. Understood?" We nodded. By week 14, we knew better than to ask questions prematurely. "You've been selected for Protocol 9, a nighttime tactical exercise testing your ability to operate under uncertainty, limited information, and psychological stress. Friday night, 2200 hours. You'll deploy in teams of 3 to remote areas. Your objective: locate and secure a designated target." He showed a topographical map. "Each team receives coordinates and basic equipment. Everything else is up to you." Questions followed. Teams were randomly assigned. Radio checks every 30 minutes. Medical support available, but teams should be self-sufficient. Mason answered with measured precision, never quite providing full clarity, which was probably intentional. "Team assignments posted tomorrow evening. Report to Equipment Depot Friday at 2100 hours. Dismissed." My roommate Carter, a former Marine, wasn't concerned. "Sounds standard. We did these all the time in the Corps." "Then why classify it?" He shrugged. "FBI protocols." But something felt off. The unfamiliar building, the unknown instructor, the emphasis on secrecy. That evening, I searched the Academy library for references to Protocol 9. Nothing. No curriculum guides, no session reports, no mention anywhere. I asked trainees from earlier sessions. Most had never heard of it. One second-year agent gave me a strange look. "You're doing Protocol 9? He asked. "Friday night. Why?" "Just be careful. Follow instructions exactly. Don't improvise." "What happened during yours?" "We didn't have one, but I've heard things. People who've done it don't like talking about it afterward." Thursday brought team assignments. I was Team 9 with Briggs, competent, former law enforcement, and Ellis, quiet but solid. We met that evening to discuss strategy. Ellis noticed something odd. "Why 13 teams? 43 trainees means uneven numbers. Everything at the academy is precise. There's a reason for 13. We couldn't figure it out. Friday arrived cold and tense. At the equipment depot, we received standard gear: flashlights, GPS, radio, water, first aid. Mason handed each team a sealed envelope. "Don't open until you reach your starting position. Transport at 2200 hours." The vans were windowless. We couldn't see where we were going. After 25 minutes of disorienting turns, our vans stopped. "Team 9, you're up." We stepped into complete darkness. The van disappeared immediately, taillights fading into trees. Ellis opened the envelope. Inside, coordinates for Point Echo, an abandoned observation post. A straight-line distance, 3 miles through dense forest. A photograph showed a small concrete structure with a metal door. We checked our radio. "Team 9 to base, radio check." "Base to Team 9, we copy. Proceed to objective. Check in at 2230. We started walking northeast. The forest at night was alive with sounds, every shadow suggesting movement. After 15 minutes, we saw a light ahead. A Coleman lantern hanging from a tree. Underneath, surveying equipment, orange flags, a grid pattern. Professional setup. Recently placed, but no one around. "Survey crew at 2200 on Friday." Ellis shook his head. "This doesn't make sense." We continued. The terrain grew steeper. At 2230, we radioed in. En route, no issues. Around 2250, we heard a voice, distant but distinct, calling something we couldn't make out. It came again, clearer, a name we didn't recognize. "Another team?" Briggs suggested. "Briefing said we wouldn't encounter other teams." We tried radioing base about the voice. Static. No response. The radio was dead. "Battery's fine. Signal shows coverage, but nothing's getting through," Briggs said. We pressed forward. 20 minutes later, wood smoke. We found a campfire burning in a clearing. No one around. More orange surveying flags. "Definitely staged," I said. "Testing if we stay focused or get distracted." Briggs tried the radio again. "Team 9 to base. Scheduled check-in." Still nothing. "We should abort," Ellis said. Loss of communications wasn't in the briefing. "We're only a mile from the objective," Briggs countered. We continued. At 23:47, Ellis checked the GPS. 200 yards. Lights ahead through the trees. Not natural. Portable floodlights illuminating a small concrete structure. Point echo. Exactly matching the photograph, but described as abandoned. These floodlights suggested otherwise. We approached cautiously. The front door had only a keypad, no handle. But circling the structure, I found a second door. Ajar. "There's another entrance." Inside was a metal ladder bolted to the wall, descending into darkness. "Sublevel," I said. "I'm taking a look." Before Ellis could stop me, I descended. 15 feet down into a concrete tunnel, fluorescent lights flickering overhead. The tunnel extended both directions, maybe 30 feet each way. Briggs and Ellis followed reluctantly. On the wall, a detailed map of underground tunnels crisscrossing the academy grounds. Dozens of passages labeled with codes. One was marked P9. "Protocol 9, Ellis pointed. "That can't be coincidence." From the eastern tunnel, the P9 tunnel, we heard footsteps. Multiple people approaching. We pressed against the wall, killing our flashlights. A group of 6 emerged. Dark clothing. Moving with purpose, not speaking. They walked right through where we were standing. Not around us. Through us. I felt nothing, no contact. They simply occupied the same space, then continued west. "What the hell was that?" Briggs whispered. "We need to leave." "Now," Ellis said. We scrambled up the ladder. Briggs tried the radio. Suddenly, it worked. "Team 9 to base. We've reached objective. Requesting immediate extraction. Base to Team 9. We copy. Remain at current position. 20 minutes." The extraction van arrived on schedule. Silent ride back. At the depot, we returned gear and went to debriefing. Coordinator Mason was waiting. "Report your findings." Briggs described the structure, the anomalies, floodlights, second door, tunnel, the 6 people who walked through us. "Interesting," Mason made notes. "The tunnel can create unusual optical effects. Under stress and fatigue, the mind interprets these as something more concrete. It wasn't optical effects," I insisted. "I'm offering a possible explanation. You completed your objective successfully, returned to your dormitory, full session debrief Monday." We left. Ellis kept muttering, "That wasn't optical effects." I couldn't sleep that night. Those people had looked real, purposeful, and they'd walked through us like we didn't exist, as if we were the ones who weren't really there. The weekend passed strangely. Most Protocol 9 participants were quiet, subdued. Whatever we'd experienced had affected everyone. Saturday afternoon, I found Ellis in the library surrounded by books about the Academy's history. This land was military research facilities during World War II and the Cold War, he said, including psychological warfare research. Testing soldiers under stress, deception, confusion. They built underground facilities for controlled scenarios. He showed me a declassified 1967 report describing environmental manipulation and perceptual conditioning experiments. They created scenarios where nothing was quite right. Time moved differently. People appeared who shouldn't be there, testing who could function despite perceptual disruption. You think Protocol 9 is connected? I think they're still running those experiments. On us, Monday's debrief confirmed our suspicions and explained nothing. Mason addressed all 43 trainees. The anomalies were intentional, part of the exercise design, testing your reactions to unexpected stimuli while maintaining focus. The Bureau operates in complex environments where plans change and equipment fails. Protocol 9 simulates that reality. When asked about the people we saw, Mason said, "Role players and Academy personnel conducting unrelated activities. Your minds created narratives to explain ambiguous stimuli." Ellis stood. With respect, we all saw the same thing. They occupied the exact physical space we were in. What's your explanation, Trainee Ellis? I don't have one, but I know what I experienced. And I'm telling you the rational explanation. Whether you accept it or continue believing the impossible is up to you. But one path leads to successful completion of training, and the other doesn't. The threat was clear. Accept the official story or face consequences. After the debrief, Ellis and I talked. That was bullshit, he said. The tunnel labeled Protocol 9 wasn't random. That was the real objective. Why misdirect us to find what they wanted us to find? To see if we'd explore beyond stated objectives. Team 9 found the Protocol 9 tunnel. No coincidence. He planned to go back that night. I agreed to join him. At 0100 hours, we reached Point Echo. The floodlights were gone. The second door was closed but unlocked. We descended. Ellis photographed the tunnel map, then we followed P9 east. It sloped downward, ending at a metal door with a keypad. Ellis tried obvious codes. Finally, 0909. The lock clicked. Inside, a room with computer workstations and a conference table. Everything powered down but well maintained. On the table, binders filled with reports. I opened one randomly. Protocol 9, Session 2608, Preliminary Results. Our session detailed profiles of every trainee, psychological assessments, performance predictions. My profile predicted I'd investigate beyond the stated objective. Recommended for Advanced Operations Track pending performance confirmation. They've been studying us, Ellis said. The entire time. They predicted exactly how we'd respond. While he photographed pages, I found a binder labeled Historical Protocols, Archive. Inside, summaries of Protocol 9 exercises going back years. Same patterns. Teams sent to remote locations. Anomalies encountered. Some teams found the tunnels, and those who found the tunnels were flagged for advanced operations. This has been running for years, I said. Testing for initiative, curiosity, willingness to violate orders. We left at 0400, reaching the Academy by 0600. That afternoon, we reviewed Ellis's photographs, the profiles, the predictions, the archives, all confirming Protocol 9 was a screening tool. What do we do with this? Ellis asked. If we report it, they'll know we went back without authorization. That's grounds for expulsion. But if we don't, it continues. We agreed to wait. Think about it. Decide later. The next morning, Ellis wasn't at formation. Medical discharge, they said. Stress-related issues. He'd already left. That evening, I was summoned to Mason's office. Trainee Ellis is no longer part of this program, he said. I'm aware you two became close during Protocol 9. I'm also aware you were the driving force behind Team 9's exploration beyond stated objectives. Initiative like that is valuable. It's one of the qualities we look for in advanced operations. He slid a document across the desk. Preliminary agreement for specialized track. enhanced training, complex assignments, opportunities unavailable to standard agents. Your Protocol 9 performance suggests you'd be a good fit. I scanned the vague language, nothing specific about what it actually involved. What happened to Ellis? The real story. Psychological break during routine evaluation. Some people aren't suited for FBI work. Better to identify that during training. Did Protocol 9 cause it? We can't isolate single events as causative factors. Meaning, yes, but we won't admit it. I need time to think. 48 hours. 5 trainees from your session are being selected. That's significant. I didn't sign. Instead, I investigated. Talked to Briggs. He'd accepted immediately. Talked to Sullivan from another class. She hadn't been selected because her team aborted early. I told Sullivan about the underground facility. She listened carefully. So you have no proof, just your word about what you saw. I know what I saw. Let's say you're right. Why would they do it? To identify people who can handle ambiguity, who won't break when reality stops making sense. That describes every good undercover agent. Exactly. They're building a pipeline for deep cover operations. The 48-hour deadline arrived. I went to Mason's office with the unsigned document. You're declining? He looked disappointed. I need more information. I can't provide details until you've agreed and received clearances. What happened to Ellis? Psychological unsuitability. Better discovered during training than in the field. How many wash out of advanced operations? About 1 in 3. It's demanding work. I'm declining, but thank you for the offer. Understand you won't get another opportunity. If you're not selected now, you won't be considered in the future. A few days later, I was summoned to Dr. Reed, a contract psychologist. This is routine, she said. I understand you declined advanced operations. I'd like to understand your reasoning. I explained my concerns. Ellis's breakdown, the 1 in 3 failure rate. Those are legitimate concerns, she said. Ellis's discharge was necessary for his well-being. He was experiencing severe anxiety and paranoid ideation. Caused by Protocol 9? Exacerbated by it. The underlying vulnerabilities were pre-existing. She leaned forward. Off the record, advanced operations isn't for everyone. Some thrive, others don't. There's no shame in recognizing you're not comfortable with that level of ambiguity. I left, wondering if the evaluation was genuine or another test. That weekend, I decided to stop investigating. Focus on graduating, starting my career. Monday morning, I was summoned to the administrative director's office. Director Warren got straight to the point. Trainee Ellis has been making concerning statements, claiming unauthorized psychological experiments, alleging Protocol 9 was misrepresented. We have reason to believe you accompanied him to a restricted facility. I can explain. I'm not interested in explanations. I want you to contact Ellis as a concerned colleague. Express worry about his mental state. Suggest professional help. Discourage him from pursuing allegations. You want me to gaslight him. I want you to help a struggling colleague. If that serves the Bureau's interests, better. And if I refuse, security footage shows you in unauthorized areas, grounds for dismissal and criminal charges. I had 24 hours. I called Sullivan. She suggested, contact Ellis but don't gaslight him. Actually listen. They can't monitor your actual conversation. I texted Ellis. He responded immediately, suggesting we meet in person at a coffee shop in his hometown. Saturday morning, I drove 3 hours. Ellis looked terrible. Thin, pale, exhausted, but not crazy, clear-eyed, coherent. They're trying to discredit me, he said. But everything I told them about Protocol 9 is true. Do you still have the photographs? They confiscated my phone. I have no evidence. Then, how can you prove it? I can't. That's the problem. He wanted collective testimony from multiple trainees. Together, we'd have credibility. We talked for an hour. Ellis described his discharge process, the psychiatric evaluation, the implicit threats. I'll think about what you've said, I told him, but I need to be careful. Are you going to help me? I don't know yet. Monday, I reported to Director Warren. Did you contact Ellis? Yes, sir. And? He's struggling, but I don't think he'll pursue allegations further. He doesn't have evidence and knows the consequences. Warren studied me. Did you encourage professional help? I suggested it might be beneficial. It wasn't exactly what they wanted, but close enough. Good. We'll consider your unauthorized access resolved. I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross. Chosen my career over truth. A small betrayal. But the Bureau would remember. I graduated in January. 20 weeks completed. The ceremony was formal and brief. I stood with 38 other successful trainees. 5 had washed out. Ellis and 4 others. My parents attended, took photographs. I smiled and felt empty. After the ceremony, Mason approached me. Congratulations. You did well despite complications. Thank you. Advanced Operations started specialized training last week. The 5 selected are doing excellent work. Good for them. It could have been you. You had the right qualities. Initiative, critical thinking. But not the willingness to accept ambiguity without question. You value certainty more than opportunity. Nothing wrong with that. The Bureau needs both kinds of agents. He finished his coffee. Your first assignment is Kansas City Field Office. Good location. You'll do well there. How do you know? Because we've been watching you for 20 weeks. We know exactly what kind of agent you'll be. I went to Kansas City. Handled routine cases. The work was fine. But I couldn't shake the feeling I was still being tested. 6 months in, Sullivan called. Ellis filed a complaint with OPR, alleging unauthorized psychological research on trainees. What happened? OPR investigated. Concluded all activities were properly authorized. No misconduct. Complaint dismissed. A year later, I was offered a position in the undercover program. Recognition of my adaptability, they said. I declined. Not everyone's cut out for deep cover work, my supervisor said. Takes a particular temperament. The same language Mason used. 2 years after graduation, Ellis called. We met at a bar. He looked healthier, but different. Wary. I've moved on, he said. Got a job with private security. I wanted to apologize for dragging you into my mess. You don't need to. I do. Because I was wrong. The Bureau wasn't conducting unauthorized research. It was all properly documented. I just didn't have access to the right documents. It was the official explanation. Word for word. Do you actually believe that? Does it matter? I've accepted it. What did they do to you? Nothing. They helped me understand I was wrong, that I was seeing patterns that didn't exist. He left. They'd gotten to him. Convinced, or pressured, or broken him. I went home and burned all my documentation. Decided Ellis was right. Overthinking would destroy me. 5 years later, I was promoted to supervisory special agent. 10 years later, offered a position at the academy teaching new trainees. I accepted. On my first day, I passed Building 12. I thought about those rooms, about Protocol 9, about everything that happened. Then I kept walking, because that's what you do in the Bureau. You accept ambiguity. You acknowledge there are layers you'll never penetrate. or it destroys you. 15 years after graduation, I helped develop new training protocols. Someone suggested enhancing nighttime navigation exercises, making them more psychologically demanding. I thought about saying something about Ellis and the others who washed out, but I didn't, because I understood now. The Bureau needed agents who could handle ambiguity, and the only way to find them was to test them, to push them, to break some of them. It was cruel, but probably necessary, or that's what I told myself. 20 years after graduation, I received a package at my academy office. Inside, a photograph of Point Echo, but different. A person stood in front, looking at the camera, too far to see their face clearly. On the back, a date, the coming Friday. I should have destroyed it, reported it. Instead, I drove to Point Echo that Friday night. The structure looked abandoned, overgrown. The door was unlocked. Inside, the ladder led down to the tunnel. I climbed down. The tunnel was still there, flickering lights, the map on the wall. I followed P9 to the metal door, entered 0909. It opened. Inside, 6 people sat around the conference table, including Mason, 20 years older. "Welcome back," he said. "We wondered how long it would take. This is a setup, a test, like Protocol 9. Like your entire career. You've passed every phase," I sat. Mason explained. 20 years ago, you demonstrated qualities we were looking for. We identified 5 trainees from your session. We've been watching all of you for 20 years, guiding assignments, testing responses. Why? The Bureau needs agents for truly difficult operations, where nothing is certain, where trust is impossible. We can't just assign people, we test them over time. One of the others was Briggs. Advanced Operations, the real unit, not the training program. You've been watching me for 20 years just to recruit me? To determine suitability, Mason corrected. You've demonstrated it repeatedly. What if I refuse? You return to your academy position. Nothing changes except you'll never know what you turned down. And if I accept, you'll learn what Advanced Operations actually does. Programs that don't officially exist. Cases never prosecuted. Environments where normal rules don't apply. I thought about Ellis. About his discharge and complaint and capitulation. Whether he'd been offered this and refused. I need time to think. 48 hours. This offer won't be repeated. This is the culmination of a 20-year evaluation. I drove back in darkness, mind spinning. Everything orchestrated. Not controlled, but guided. It should have felt like violation. Instead, it felt like validation. 48 hours later, I returned. Mason was waiting alone. Well, I'd weighed everything. Tried to find a reason to refuse, but I couldn't. I needed to know what this was for, what Protocol 9 had really prepared us for. "I'm in," I said. Mason smiled. "Welcome to Advanced Operations." He pulled out documents. The same research files Ellis and I had found 20 years ago. Profiles, predictions, historical records. "These are incomplete," he said. "They show one layer. There are others, deeper ones. Now you'll learn all of them." He began explaining. With each revelation, I understood more about the Bureau's invisible architecture. The mechanisms selecting and developing agents for operations the public would never know existed. It was bigger than I'd imagined, more complex, more necessary, and more disturbing. By dawn, we climbed out, stood in front of Point Echo as the sun rose. "Welcome to the real FBI," Mason said. "Everything until now was preparation. Now the actual work begins." He walked to a vehicle, paused. "One more thing. Protocol 9 starts tonight for the current session. 43 new trainees, 13 teams. You'll be observing, taking notes, identifying the ones with the right qualities, just like we did with you. You want me to run the same program that was run on me? That's how it works. Each generation develops the next. Running for 50 years. You're just the latest link. He drove away. I stood alone, watching sunrise, thinking about what I'd agreed to. In hours, 43 trainees would assemble for a classified briefing. They'd be sent into the woods. Some would complete the basic task, some would go further. A few would find things they weren't supposed to find. And I would be watching, evaluating, deciding who to offer opportunities and who to let wash out. Just like Mason watched me. Just like someone watched him. An unbroken chain stretching back 50 years. I walked to my car. I had work to do, trainees to prepare, an exercise to coordinate. Protocol 9 was starting tonight, and I was part of it now. Not a subject, an administrator.